I do believe the best idea can win if people recognize the person who's fighting most passionately for something. There's something there.
I saw Albert Hughes and I said, I remember being on the Zoom and I said, wait, Albert Hughes, like of the Hughes brothers, Albert Hughes?
I wish you can keep it up full. I wish you guys can keep the movie up full time and not have to dip away.
But, you know, the pressure was on at that point and Chad was really invested. And then we thought we were like, oh, great. Now we get to go in and pitch the CEO. And it's like, well, you have to now pitch Keanu.
Somebody call a doctor because bad medicine is back. Over there's Diamond Dave Damone. This is the Appleton Oak. That's the answer. I'm Mason Quinn. Folks, today we have a special treat. We were able to sit down with Kirk Ward and Albert Hughes from the Continental. This was a lot of fun for us, and you know what? We hope you enjoy it.
Let's go!
Okay. But can I get your names from Dave and down so I can know who I'm talking to?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm Diamond Dave.
Well, I'm David. On the channel we go by Appleton Oak, but David is my name. Yeah.
It all started in 1979.
Oak so. Is the Oak is kind of, and then Quinn and then, right here, Quinn. Yeah.
Okay, Quinn. Okay.
And then the answer or Andrew.
So these guys all
so we were you don't look like Allen Iverson.
We're pro wrestlers.
That is actually a play on Allen Iverson. He has the wristband and everything. He's a big fan of them.
They all did pro.
No, I did a commercial with Allen Iverson. He was one of my favorites.
Oh, nice!
I finally got to meet him. He was great.
That would have been awesome.
Did you ask him about practice?
Oh yeah, we got into it all. Like the funniest thing about the interview was like we were supposed to do a documentary style, and we go to his house. And we're telling the ad agency, it's docu-style. My brother and me did American Pimp. That's why we were in Milwaukee, right? And I carried the camera. It was filmed back then. And he does the recorder. So we just want to show up at his house and, yeah, sure. And then we get there on the day, and sure enough, there's like 5 big-ass movie trucks behind us, knocking on the door. Alan answers it, and he's like, what the fuck is that? Well, they wanted to bring all this shit, so... We go and we start interviewing him in the side room as he's ordering Philadelphia cheesesteaks from the center of town. And he starts going into the NBA and now how all these young kids are coming in and fucking up the league. And they got to sit these kids down and talk about money and condoms and getting women pregnant. And he's doing it off the fly. It's great stuff, but it wouldn't work in a commercial.
Right after that, Reebok.
To give you some
it was a Reebok commercial. Yeah, it was.
That's awesome. To give you some context behind the names, because it might just sound random, Andrew, Quinn, and I did pro wrestling for over 12 years on the indie scene. So that's where the nicknames come from. And then Dave joined us in our little bad medicine group here probably 2019.
2019, yeah.
And Andrew just kind of on a whim just said Appleton Oak.
Actually,
Quinn, one of these two.
I said he was the man of 1,000 poses.
So Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of his nicknames is the Austrian Oak, and we're there's big Arnold fans, but he thought he'd go off of that and call me the Appleton Oak. We were telling Kirk I worked for Arnold for a few years as a media director for his Arnold Schwarzenegger Classic in Columbus, and when I started working for them, my boss, the executive director, and his PR guy at the time saw some of our work, and they're like, "The Appleton Oak, huh? That's and I'm like, I swear to God, it was before I started. It was before
my brother produced the Netflix documentary that just recently came out.
Oh, your brother produced the Arnold one? Oh,
no kidding.
That's wild.
Sweet.
Yeah, that was awesome. By the way, kudos to you.
Yeah, that was incredibly well done and really showed a different side of him. I was telling Kirk earlier, my interactions with Arnold were pretty limited to the weekend in Columbus each year, and a couple pay-per-view production meetings and a steak dinner afterwards. But he's an interesting guy.
We sat next to him at one of our first dinners together, Albert in Budapest.
That's right. He was sitting across from us. And I said, it's Arnold. And you're like, no, it's not. And I go, Kirk, look. And you're like, oh my God, it is. And then somebody was trying to approach him. And one of the guys like, stop, like, come on, he's just having his dinner, leave him alone.
Yeah.
No, I snuck a picture. I'll share it with you guys.
That's right.
It was a bad photo.
It's like sneaking it.
Like the selfie.
Well, if it had been the olden days, it would have been like a...
But it's interesting because Kirk and I were talking about, like, we did this Movies That Made Us podcast, which I've done several times before. And the interesting thing about Arnold, as it relates to Kirk mostly, is Kirk is a massive 80s guy, movie, buff. Like Joe Silver, Lethal Weapons, Die Hard, the Arnold movies. And I was into those movies too. I loved them, but it's like etched in his memory. So when we were doing the Continental, it's like my side and his side come together. It's like you got your peanut butter and my chocolate, and it makes a Reese's Pieces, basically.
Kirk, I have to ask a question. This is the perfect segue. So, and I know we're going to have a handful of questions, and I've told these guys I was waiting to ask. So I grew up, I'm 44. My oldest brother was born in 73. So we grew up watching 80s movies. And two of my all-time favorites, which are kind of cult classics now, are Better Off Dead and One Crazy Summer with John Cusack.
Great.
So
great movie.
There are two things in episode 2 that are mentioned that are also in the movie One Crazy Summer. And I was wondering whether that's complete coincidence or if that was done on purpose. The sniper. Oh God, I feel like I'm on the spot. The sniper Jenkins mentioned the Dewdrop, which was a bar that Demi Moore's character played at in One Crazy Summer, and the trailer that played the "Let's All Go to the Lobby" on the big screen. Yeah. John Cusack was on a date at the drive-in theater in One Crazy Summer, and that same thing was playing, and I'm like, the Dewdrop and the exact same trailer for the outdoor theater. I said, I wonder, because there's so many Easter eggs, right? I'm like, I wonder if somebody slipped in like an 80s Easter egg. The total coincidence?
Might have been subconscious, but no.
Oh.
No, and Let's All Go to the Lobby that was just like a last minute.
That was a backup.
Like a last minute thing that we were looking for stuff, and I was hey Albert, what about this? And it's iconic, and it was really easy to license, but no, I'm a big Better Off Dead fan.
Classics, quotable Christmas movie.
Well, and we watched
the Christmas stuff too.
And we watched a couple interviews that you guys had done in the lead up. And Albert, I wanted to ask you because you said I believe you said you were a big fan of the Road Warrior and some of those movies early on. And it's hard, and maybe you run into this in what you do is sometimes it's hard for me at my age to explain to somebody younger why like Mad Max is so amazing, and they don't get like, well, it was all practical. Those guys were really on bikes. The guy had a camera when Goose is doing like 140 miles an hour. There's a guy sitting behind him with a camera filming the Speedo. And it's just like the level at the way that was made, I think is just incredible. I don't know that a lot of times if you're not a huge fan of it, if it necessarily gets the respect that it maybe deserves.
You're absolutely right. And you look at someone like Mad Max, which I'm a bigger fan of Road Warrior because he got money then. And Mad Max, you see all the ideas and you see the talent. You're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then here comes Road Warrior. And what you're talking about is a particular thing now. You take George Miller and give him Fury Road now with all the money and VFX in the world. And now it doesn't feel as organic as these other two, but it's on another level because the guy's in the 70s doing insane shit in that movie, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same talent on 3 different degrees and 3 different decades, basically, doing these movies. And no, George Miller's the man.
Yeah. Well, and kind of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The shot in the Road Warrior when the guy on the motorcycle flips end over end in slow motion.
And then his head goes into that.
Complete accident. Like everyone's always tried to duplicate that shot, but that was like a flaw in the planning of the stunt planning, and he went end over end, and it was beautiful. Slow motion is incredible, but
but these things happen all the time in movies where there's mistakes. We call them happy accidents, and people think like we had a small one in episode 3 when Lemmy was fighting the mailroom attendant. He really kicked her in the face, and it knocked her glasses off, right? Because I remember I would hand off to the action unit. We shoot the intro and we shoot the exit. Then they shoot the action. So I'm like, are you sure her glasses are going to stand? Because I was obsessed with the look of her, the chopsticks in her hair, the librarian glasses, the tattoo. I was obsessing over for months. And she was like, they're never coming off, Albert. They're never coming off. So apparently he kicked her in the face and everybody's freaked out. Like, what are we going to do to cover this? And they came up with the brilliant idea. She'll just pick him up and put him on, start punching him.
Oh, nice.
But it looks like it's scripted, but it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, and
happy accidents.
Yeah. The thing we had kind of mentioned is because, like when you started filmmaking to where it is now, how the technology has changed. Like, I mean, how has that kind of changed things for you or made it a little bit
just
different?
Even from like an editing process,
editing.
For both of you.
It was you know, Kirk and I came up in the period you guys came up in, which is we were able to see analog go to digital, whether it was music, whether it's movies, whether it's in your house, TV, all that stuff, the home computer. I started out with the Apple IIc in 1982-83 in my class.
Yeah.
And, you know, the first Macintosh came to me in high school in my computer class when we were working on Zenith computers with the green, you know, cursor.
Yeah.
But in movie making, it to me, it's like, when it comes to film, I remember on my first movie, Menace to Society, and my second movie was film, and my third movie was film. But that one in particular, you don't know what you have until you watch dailies the next day, right?
God.
So one day we're on the set and we're shooting the scene where his cousin gets killed at a traffic light, and the assistant camera person comes back to us and goes, I made a horrible mistake. And I'm like, what? I reloaded the same film of the death scene when he's on the ground. I'm like, oh my God. You reloaded the same film. So when we got it in dailies the next day, it's a double exposure of two different moments in the scene. And we have to reshoot that moment he's on the ground dead, which I played the body double because I couldn't get the guy back from Oakland. Right? And then you have this mysterious thing in film where you don't know, it never looks like the way they lit it when you were there. Now you have these digital cameras and you have these HD monitors and you know everything you're going to get. And they have the look already built in, even though you're going to color it later. And I just find that the more control you have to see, the more control you have, period.
Yeah.
It's better. You know, film is a very, there's a certain group of filmmakers, about 5 of them, they're always like wax nostalgic off of film. Oh my God, we got to preserve film. We got to preserve film. And, you know, I'm a little worried of nostalgic white men because next thing I know, they're going to want some trees and some ropes. So,
well, you had talked about, and maybe you can just tell the story for the other guys in case they didn't get it, but you talked about how you went and got those old lenses.
That's exactly what I was
when you guys were doing the Continental.
That
to
how
get
you
that
made the
look.
look so
and-
iconic.
yeah, so you guys have
us.
heard of Panavision, of course, and you know, Lethal Weapon was shot on Panavision. All those big action movies from the 70s and 80s. I mean, they've been around forever. I had never been to the Panavision office in Woodland Hills, so my DP sends me in there on another show, and I said, "Give me the most fucked up lenses you guys have. they can have cracks." He goes, "Albert, you don't want a crack because it doesn't look the way you think." Well, give me some old shit that nobody wants. So they bring in this B series, and MGM shot their movies on it in Pathé. It's either created by Pathé or made for MGM in 1950. He puts it on, and it's all these aberrations, and they're so old and so heavy, it look like they're built by NASA, you know. And and they're super Panavision. That means they're 277 format, the extra wide screen, not the ones that. What it did for us was, you know, just subtly make the picture look more aged because digital is so sharp. Now, at the same time, I asked them, give me a list of films that were shot on these because, of course, it carries over to the 50s, 60s, 70s. And out of the 200 or 300 films, Cool Hand Luke was one of them. Dr. Zhivago and The Graduate were shot on those exact lenses.
Nice. That's insane.
But they're not easy to use.
I bet not.
From an editing standpoint, so Diamond Dave obviously does a lot of our editing, and then my media work, I've had to learn very, very rudimentary and basic video editing just for, you know, interviews and projects that we have to get up kind of on the fly. And you know, of course, there's After Effects and all that stuff. For the both of you, talk to us a little bit about, we're going to use these old lenses to get that actual like organic versus just shooting it on a digital lens and going in. I mean, there's a billion, you know, Premiere Pro or what, I don't know what editing, but there's a billion different, you know, vintage this, grainy this. Why the actual old lens versus just doing it digitally after?
Well, we did add a little bit of that in too. We scanned old film grain and then we overlaid that.
Oh,
right?
nice.
You can bloom, you can add artifacts, but it's always better to kind of capture it, I think. You know, yes, I think someone like David Fincher, you look at The Killer just recently, all those flares you see in the movie are digital flares.
Right.
He's into extreme control and getting the footage clean as possible so that he can degrade it the way he wants. You had your pen up, Kirk. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. All I was going to set the table was and say, this is so above my pay grade. That's why I was. That's why it was incredible to have a filmmaker like Albert, because like I would geek out watching him geek out, and it was like film school for me. Because like when he started talking about lenses and stuff, I was like, this is awesome that you know all this.
But this is also like why we he can tell you a story of how we actually met, which is pretty funny because I don't remember meeting in the 90s, right?
He told us the valet parking.
But when we really met on this, it was this perfect kind of the Defiant Ones 48 hours relationship. It was a yin and yang, and he knows how to push my buttons. I know how to push his buttons in a good way. Like he'll say something to me, and sometimes in your stomach, like, oh, what the fuck is he talking about? And you walk away like, actually, shit, that's way better than what I was thinking, because he's come from a slightly different upbringing, slightly different taste, and I'm glad he doesn't know what I know, and I'm glad I don't know what he knows. So there's this kind of really this real balance and geeking off of movies, and he's geeking off it for a particular reason. And I may be geeking off it just from the tech side. He can show me a shot. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what to do, but there's something going on here. I like this. And then I look at it and go, oh, here's what they're doing.
I was going to say, I have a question that we talked with these gentlemen kind of about before. In my lifetime, I guess, of watching movies, credits roll, director, executive producer, writer, cast. Now, I got to be honest, for me, showrunner is a relatively new term for me. I don't really recall hearing that before. Just at a real high level, talk to us a little bit about the difference between a showrunner, a director, executive producer. Who's doing what? Because again, I think it was maybe Walking Dead when we first started
noticing
showrunner, and I'm like, okay, I don't ever recall any movie credits roll and seeing showrunner, but now it's definitely more common.
Look, I'll dive in and say it's a loaded word, right? It was two words. Now it's like there's different spelling. Now it's just like showrunner, right? Essentially, as a showrunner in television, you're running the show. Everything has to go through you. You have power over the director, more often than not.
Writer's medium. It's a writer's medium.
The writer's medium, and that's, I think, for me, it's a great thing because I like to defer to people that are better than me, and I have no problem going. I say this all the time to Albert. My motto is I don't know is a complete sentence. Like, use that on set. Don't fucking know. Don't pretend you know. Pretending you know is going to cause a whole other world of hurt when we get to the day when we're supposed to do something and you've pretended and it's a mess. So, this was a unique project where, when we were looking at directors for this project.
That's what I was going to ask.
Albert's heard this story a million times. This list comes in and you recognize some of the names. And there was no, the first list that came in, there was no importance in the list. I saw Albert Hughes and I said, I remember being on this Zoom and I said, wait, Albert Hughes, like of the Hughes brothers, Albert Hughes? We can get this guy? This guy would want to do this? And to me, massive budget, 3 movies, action, exciting, incredibly passionate about it, but incredibly overwhelming. That's how I felt. And to not have somebody that has done this for 30-something years at this level and delivered consistently over and over, for me, it was like, oh, oof, because there were many, many, many times emails would come in and I'm like, oh man, I have to answer this question.
Well, right? It's also, Kirk, it's also because the word showrunner is a writer's medium. TV has kind of blurred now, where features and feature filmmakers and writers and actors are, so now we've talked about this, Kirk and I, is what that title does to some of these writers, because they're writers and they're EPs, they're executive producers, is it goes to their heads. It ruins them. Because in actuality, if I'm directing a movie, they don't call me a showrunner of the movie. Or they may call me a filmmaker. Okay. If you're doing your job right, you're called a filmmaker, right? The problem with giving a writer that type of title, and they haven't earned their way up to it, is they're picking things that a filmmaker is supposed to pick. The cameraman, the wardrobe, the production designer, the edit, everything they are doing is a filmmaker's job. And there's very few showrunners that know how to do it really well, like Noah Hawley, for instance, who does Fargo, or the guys from Walking Dead, like you mentioned, right? There's a few powerhouse, like even Shonda Ryan, and then Ryan Murphy, that have earned their way in the old system of knowing how to handle all that, right? And we were in a particular situation. I won't get into the mess of it all, but there were some people in our team that weren't up to snuff, and weren't saying that sentence that Kirk says, like, I don't know. They were trying to act like they knew, and I was like sitting there like I could smell this a mile away.
Yeah, you've been in the business.
This motherfucker don't know. This dude is more interested in chasing tail out here in Europe. Finding himself like a daughter wife. So you got those.
Well, that was.
Because I was gonna just say, like, how quick was the phone call then from Ward to you to get you on this project?
Well,
once you saw his name, it was.
But I don't want to make this sound like I chose Albert. I mean, I was very enthusiastic about Albert, but when the discussions with Thunder Road, Basil Iwanek, Erica Lee, Lionsgate, they started talking to Albert. We were not involved in those conversations. There was a, hey, you guys, we're going to approach Albert Hughes, and I was at home going like this, and that was. When Albert came on board, everything shifted, and it was wonderful that it shifted, because you had somebody with a real vision and experience at the helm, and one of the.
But it also started our partnership, because to be honest, there was a label of showrunner hanging over two other guys too.
Okay.
And you can't really run a film or a TV show that way. You can only have one showrunner and one director, and if it gets too confused, you guys can have this wonderful show, like you guys know how to divvy up the time, and we've seen a lot of your shows, and you guys all have a particular personality, right? But if you guys had to actually make something together, it gets a little. I mean, actually, we're going to go shoot something, and you need what's that called, Kirk? It's like the duties, the delineation of duties.
Oh, separation of duties.
Yep. Yeah. And delegate who's doing what, for sure.
And what was cool was, for me, Albert was designing this. When Albert's shot list came in, it was mind blowing for me, because it was like, the script is one thing, but when somebody, was it 100 and how many pages, Albert?
150
page PDF came, and it was like exciting, intimidating, and my mind had so many questions, because Albert draws every shot. There's little lines next to this, the shot of like questions for VFX, questions for wardrobe, make sure we do this. I mean, unbelievably thorough. So when I knowing his work and then seeing how he worked, that he put that much into it, was incredibly inspiring. And I remember the first day we were doing the shot, it was a oneer, and I was watching Albert go back and forth with it, and I said, I think I said something like, "Why do you like oneers?" It was a very naive question, and Albert said, "Because there's nowhere to hide when you're doing a oneer. Every department has to be invested. The actors have to know, the production designer. It's one shot, and it's going to track a certain way." And I was like, my point in saying this is, if a showrunner, somebody would have gone, "No, I don't want to do it that way. I don't want to do it that way," and they would have stepped on it, thinking that they just get coverage, and piece it together.
So we can figure it out in the edit thing, that's what they always want. Yeah.
And it was, for me, it was nerve wracking in a way, because you're like, it looks great, I just hope we have everything, and then it just became this flow and this collaboration where. For me, I was on first unit a lot, but I also oversaw stunt unit, because, first unit was pretty much handled with Albert. I mean, we gave him what he wanted, but tried to stay out of the way. That's my job, is to go, hey, what do you need? What do you need to succeed?
Well, that's the thing that in this partnership that works so well. It's we both have our own individual egos, I'm sure you guys do, right? But sometimes when you have a healthy ego, and a healthy ego to me is recognize what you don't do,
right?
And we both recognize what we don't do, and Kirk would step in and do something, and I'd be like, well, he's producing right now, and he's better at producing this than I am, and I just have to shut the fuck up and let it take its course, you know?
Yeah.
Or an idea thing, you know, like, you know, they always say the best idea wins. They say that, but once you sneak the wrong ego in there, it may not happen. I do believe the best idea can win if people recognize the person who's fighting most passionately for something. There's something there.
There must be a reason. Well, and you know, the Continental, I know when the three of us watched it, after that first episode, I was, you know, we were all pretty blown away. And what I liked about it was, you know, from both a fan and somebody who may be speculating about the inside business of it. As a fan, I loved the way it was shot. I loved the music. It was incredible. Everything from the opening credits, how that tied into what happened in the show. But as I'm thinking about it as somebody who's in your guys' shoes, man, the pressure of like, this is the John Wick universe that has some very ravenous fans and they, you know, expect a certain level. And man, the pressure you guys.
Well, what I remember about watching you guys is like, because I'm trying to get it right now. So Quinn and Andrew is next to you. The answer is next to you.
Yep.
Okay. And Dave on the far side.
Yeah.
Okay. You got
the other Dave.
The answer and Dave, the answer and Dave were more rabid fans than you were, Quinn,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And that was an interesting thing to watch, that dynamic of them knowing the details and you saying, hey, I love John Wick, but not like you guys, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And watching that dynamic at play, because yes, Kirk and I had this pressure and we still beat ourselves up about certain things we read, or, you know, like it's amazing that when you make a movie or a project, or you guys even put out a podcast, how many stupid motherfuckers are out there?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, if you're gonna say
Who
it,
who don't read what you guys wrote in the log line or the caption, and they're saying some stupid question like we just literally wrote it, or we literally said it in the show. Like, and it starts to expose who the market or who the audience. You're like, okay, 33% of society are just dumb motherfuckers. Okay, just dumb. There's no get back. They're a write off. The other 33 are average or below average intelligence. Okay, and then you have the upper 33, which are base level average intelligence, all the way up to the upper 5 or 3%, right? So that's what we're doing. Okay, whenever you guys put something out, we put something out, right? So we're like, why doesn't it look like John Wick? And it's like, motherfucker, because it's in the 70s.
yes.
Where's John Wick? Where's John Wick? It's like, okay, we wanted
to see a 2-year-old come out and start whooping ass. That's what we wanted to see, you know.
I know. I mean, when we before Albert came on board, it was a long process to get this project going. Like, everybody in town was up for it, blah blah blah, and we had to go through 10 meetings in 3 months of 3 months of development and 10 meetings to get the job. And part of that process was getting past Chad Stahelski. Had to sit down with Chad Stahelski and pitch him the take of his movie. And the thing, right, which is crazy.
Yeah.
The thing that he responded to right away was, what I really like about this is it's far away from the present day John Wick. And it really came from the line in John Wick 3 when Winston says, I have served as a beacon of order and stability in our industry for over 40 years. And then subtracting 40 from roughly 2014, landing somewhere in the 70s. But, you know, the pressure was on at that point, and Chad was really invested. And then we thought, we were like, oh, great, now we get to go in and pitch the CEO. And it's like, well, you have to now pitch Keanu. And it was like,
Yeah.
And John Wick 3 had just come out, and we had to sit down with John Wick. Albert's met Keanu several times. I saw him at a bookstore once. I don't know him like Albert is, and other people that interact with him. But when you're in a room with that guy, like, I was like, oh, I totally get everything. Like, his presence, his aura, the contemplative thought, his intelligence, his wit, his how honestly naive he can be. But we had to pitch him the show. Well, he said, I don't want to hear the whole pitch, but just tell me about the show. And it was like, Oh man, how do you do that?
Your elevator pitch.
Then once Keanu, Chad, they were big supporters of it and really helped us. Chad put together a lookbook of the 70s for our final meeting. But
before I came on though.
And none of that stuff we used, but it was reference in the room with the CEO of Lionsgate, John Feldheimer, so that he could understand that there was a support system on it before Albert came on board. So it was pressure. It was pressure back then, right? Mm-hmm. Pressure back then, and it was getting the job, and then going. It's that thing, right? That thing with actors or anyone. It's like, oh, if I just had this, and then you get it, and you're like, oh fuck. Now I got to do this, right? And the action in this show, I mean, what a lot of people don't know is like we had John Wick stunt team. Chad put us in touch with Larnell Stovall, and the 8711 team came along, and through all of the design, I mean, Albert was a stickler from the beginning of like, look, I don't want some rogue second unit going off and shooting a bunch of shit that's not going to look like my style.
Yeah.
So there was if you look at the trajectory of the movies, the way that, it was a little more handheld in the staircase and stuff.
You're talking about our movie.
Yeah, they're about our movie. Yeah, sorry.
Our movie.
And by the time we got to the third movie, Albert was
handheld.
No handheld. Handheld's gone. And I remember that production meeting because the stunt guys were like, oh shit, like we can't rely on our bag of tricks. And Albert was like, you got to push yourself, and we have to make this more cinematic.
Because the thing that the audience doesn't understand about handheld, and the stunt department said this, is that if an actor or a stunt guy misses their mark, they can adjust. And a lot of action movies use this handheld because it's on the fly and it's kind of a style, but there's no what's the word? Discipline. There's no discipline. And he brought up the word oneer earlier. When you do a oneer, it can do two things for you when you're shooting a movie. One is it can give you an efficiency where you can move on and spend more time on other shots. You get through that scene quick, right?
It's done. Yeah.
And it's done. But he also said no one can hide. So everybody becomes like a fighter pilot. They're super focused. The actors, the production design, hair and makeup, because they're like, I'm exposed. It's one shot. If I fuck up, everybody's gonna see I fucked up. So they're not on their phones. They're looking at the monitor because they're super nervous. Yeah. And you hit them with a oneer every other day. Hit them with a oneer, and it keeps them on their toes. So then when you present this to a stunt team,
sets a tone.
You can't do it in handheld. They got to start thinking about now the discipline of the shots and the style of the shots now and how it's served. Even in the John Wick films, they do have loose handheld that's really well done. It's not like the Paul Greengrass crazy shit, right? But sometimes they go into this very classic style of shooting that's not handheld, and they found this really lovely balance of because that's a different style than the TV show, but it's at a very high level what they're doing on those John Wick movies.
Yeah, and that third movie, the action sequences at the end, I thought were incredible. And what I loved, and there was a scene in particular that I think the three of us really liked. And look, we've been watching action movies as long as I can remember. And the fact that you guys were still able to do unique stuff that I hadn't seen before. And the one in particular I'm thinking of is where there's a guy around a corner with a shotgun and he shoots off part of the corner of the wall to get the other guy. Yeah. I've never seen that before. And we're just like, man, they keep coming up with new stuff.
We'd seen the foot before,
that's interesting.
But never
right through. That scene you're talking about was there was another challenge put to Larnell, which is, hey, some of this stuff is going to be CCTV. You're not going to be able to go off and shoot this. And he was trying to sneak behind me and shoot it with a real, the film look as a backup. I go, no, there's no backup, right? So it's like, well, how do I get another angle? If I know another angle, go, maybe somebody shoots the camera and it falls on the floor. And that's when that moment happened. Yeah. And he was like, oh, so the camera gets shot by a bullet. It's a little Dutch tilt. And then he blasts it's a woman that's with a crossbow that he blasts through the corner, which is not my idea. I don't know where it came from, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it came out of that collaboration. I remember that moment because, when that writing the third movie in particular, CCTV kind of became a crutch, right? It was like, oh, we'll go to CCTV and then there'll be a quicker action sequence. But when we got into like designing it, Albert was like, guys, this is not just put up a camera. Like we have to design this, and we're limited to, like he said, we were limited to that angle. So it really.
But not only that, though, Kirk. Remember, we thought, oh, we can just green screen, Cormac's, the control room.
Oh yeah.
And the production designer was such a great guy because he ain't doing nothing easy. He's like, hey, if we shoot that footage first, we can actually pipe it in for real.
Oh,
and they don't do that in movies nowadays. You don't do that anymore because you can put it in later. Back in the 90s when I started, you couldn't put it in later unless you had a really big budget. So that's all real piped in footage. It's not post-production.
So when he's in the control room and he's looking at all those screens is footage that you guys actually shot. That's wild.
That's awesome.
And there's like a wizard behind that set that's on this control panel. And he's like, "What do you need this shot?" And then he throw it into that corner of that screen. Wow. And this guy's on this control bank. And I'm like, well, we have to degrade that image more. So you do some overlay of like Adobe After Effects or static or something. Yeah. I mean, it was like this Hungarian guy that was like the Wizard of Oz behind that bank of monitors.
That is awesome.
It became its own. What happened was then it became its own, like its own unit. Like CCTV became its own unit. And I remember over Easter, when we went to that getaway, Albert, you and I and Adrian, I had to like essentially create a shot list of like, okay, when we need to shoot a guy waving at the camera, we need to shoot a guy, like it just became this kind of improvisation. And then we sat with Neil and our first and our line producer and Nick. And Nick to kind of focus in on what we were going to shoot.
Well, but that's how important an AD is. This guy was an old school AD. He's in his 60s. And he knows how to do shit like that, how to schedule it.
Yeah.
He's like, well, and he would always like, when you have a great AD, he'll say, shit, we're done shooting this scene. Should we do a CCTV? And just get the GoPro. Just put a GoPro up here and run some people through this room because this is a great location.
Yeah. Nice.
And we're so busy thinking about our jobs, like we wouldn't think to do that. He was like, oh, we got 5 minutes. Let's just run some people through here and get shot.
Yeah.
Kirk, I have a question for you. You were talking a little bit about working with the team from John Wick and then, of course, with Keanu just to get their blessings and approvals. Of course, we're dealing with a fictional universe, but was there some sort of like list of rules that they gave you about the Continental? Because the Continental, obviously, when we got introduced to John Wick, I mean, that was a really cool concept. Like all the, everybody gets to stay there. They have all their unique rules. But again, it's a fictional world. Now, when you're doing the spinoff, did they say, okay, here's like the book of rules we created from the Continental, and we need your shows, your movies to stay in line with what we've created in this other universe, because it's a whole, the high table, the educator, I mean, Mel Gibson's character. I mean, there's so many different rules and intricacies there. Did they kind of line those up for you?
Well, Kirk, the best story is you with the red light. That was the best story I heard about the rules.
Yeah, I mean I'll get to that. That it's a very tricky thing because Chad Stahelski said, look, whatever you do, don't reveal the high table.
All right.
And you're like that's rule number one, like don't reveal the high table, right? So which is it's a very smart thing to do because John Wick is beyond just a hitman movie, is a mystery, right? There's a mysterious element to what this thing is. So, but then he countered that with, if you run into a problem, make up a new rule. Right. So he talked about how Keanu came up with the blood oath thing for John Wick 2. Like that was just something.
The marker.
That they created. And, when we were going to do it, we knew that the promise of the premise was going to be, we're going to take over the Continental Hotel, but you can't kill on Continental grounds. Right. So it's like, what are we going to do? And so this idea came up of like, what if there's a red light? And the red light goes on. And when the red light goes on, it means, everything's paused and you're allowed to kill. And I remember reaching out to Chad about that, right? Like, hey, this is what we're playing with here. Because, you don't want to just, this was the first time the universe was being built, right? So it's like, you don't want to get off on the wrong foot. And then you're like, put something in a script and you're down the road and he reads it and goes, oh, you can't do that. And then you got to go all the way back. And he thought it was a dope rule. right? So that's why we really used it in the opening sequence of night one to really kind of set that standard so that it paid off, right? So that we see Frankie, like when you walk in, they've all got the guns, like, why don't they shoot him? And Frankie looks over his shoulder and he's waiting, light goes off and boom. But
also it was a shittier run organization back then, so it leaves room for
I say that. I see. Yeah. Yeah. It evolved.
That's a good way to get around it.
if the word shittier is a real word. I don't know.
and
We'll make it work.
It is
I
now.
want to say one thing, which to give credit to the unsung hero of this project, and I speak about him every time I can. That's Ken Christensen, who was a co-EP on the show, and just a brilliant guy, an incredible collaborator, and thank God he was part of this show because he was with it all the way through and wrote unbelievable stuff. And I would be Albert nicknamed me this. I would be Gary Busey because I was like sleep deprived and like manically out of my mind and just like stressed out.
Kramer was the other one.
Kramer. Just like, what's Gary Busey? And I would get on I'd just be like, hey, Albert, listen up. Here's what we're going to do.
You talk. Give me two.
But Kirk, hey. See, what we're not mentioning to you guys, like, I don't come from TV. He's done TV series before, right? And I'm sure you guys know already, sometimes you're shooting the pilot and as you're shooting, they're writing the other episodes, whether it's 8 or 10 or 22, right? Episode 3 was not written when I did 1.
Whoa.
It was not written when Charlotte Branstone came on and we had to produce 2. He was going into writing 3 while they were shooting 2, I think. Yeah. And we were going through some internal stuff that I can't mention online, but Kirk was really feeling some type of way about some things that were going on. And I said, well, the best thing you can do is write the best fucking script you've ever written. And he went in with Ken, and when I got it, it's not exactly the way it ended up because we were at that point starting to collaborate with everybody. Actors, production designers, that all helped us. But when I got it, I go, wow, this is at a certain point nonstop. And I just forgot the thing I thought was dope 10 pages ago. I forgot because this thing right here is dope now. and I'd never seen. And so we shot this whole thing with the script being wet. And when we got to the edit, for the first time in my career, I was not familiar with the beats of the story. I didn't know what was coming next. So I had to watch, like, for you guys to have a reaction video, it's one thing. And for you guys to watch it without doing a reaction video is another thing. For me to watch it, I had to watch it 5 times to understand what was like, where am I? What's going on? Because I didn't get to memorize the script like a normal thing. But thank God we had this team in place that was well oiled, and we both can't speak enough to great collaboration. You can have a good director, a good writer, a good this, a good, but you don't have the support system around that's challenging you and doing things. And we had a great production designer. We had a great DPs. We had great hair and makeup. We had great wardrobe. And it rarely happens that your team, the answer, we'll get into the answer. Sometimes you have some weak links on that team, and he's not going to make it past the Lakers in 2001.
Well, I was going to ask, since you didn't know like that, was that like more exhilarating to watch the final product, like sitting there?
It was exhilarating shooting it.
Oh, even that, yeah.
The thing I never had before, and I've worked with great crews. I've never been in a situation where, again, you can liken this to a basketball game. I've never been in a situation like all hands are on deck and all cylinders are going off at the same time and they're all talented. Like, I've always had a wink link somewhere and you have to cover it up in the edit or something. Like, all these motherfuckers are ambitious. Like, this is crazy. This is all happening at the same time. So before even getting to answering your question you just asked, when I was on the set, I was like, whoa. Like, this person's stepping up. Like, it's a bounce pass I've never seen before, or he's doing a windmill dunk. I could just pass the ball. I'm like, I've never seen this before, right? Then you get to the edit, and then I have this master editor that I worked with before who's doing shit I've never seen before. So then I start to, like, when you start to look at your own ego in a very healthy way, and you go, wow, this is what it's really about, man. Like, letting these people fly. And they're going to make you look better, and you're going to make them look better, hopefully. But I'm more concerned about them making me look better.
Well, also what was interesting, especially about the third movie, is there was not a lot of prep and not a lot of time, right? So there would be times that Albert would go, why? I remember this argument, this discussion we would have where Albert would go, I would say, look, I'm just reverse engineering it with this character. I'm going to put this character in a vent. And he'd be like, don't reverse engineer it. I'm like, it sounds worse than it is. Just trust me. Like, we have to just shoot her in a vent because we need to know where she is because we have these other characters to service. So there was a lot of times where it was just trust, right? It was trust where this is something that I wanted to happen in the narrative. And Albert was like, well, this is something that has to happen as a filmmaker. We have to capture it from this point of view. There was so many.
Like we got into a big argument about what do you call it when you put the gun inside what do you call that thing? That
holster?
The gun?
Scabbard.
The shotgun scabbard,
Oh,
right?
scabbard, yeah, for a shotgun.
That he had that underneath Mel Gibson's desk or Cormac's desk. And he also had the red button, which I upset. Like, how am I going to get this across? Like, I was just pulling my hair out. And that whole scene was like way different. It started like Sharon was getting choked by Cormac, and
the key fell out.
The key. It was the red button, and then I'm like, this shotgun thing. How am I? Kirk's like, let me just show you. And then he went to the props and got it made. I'm like, dude, that doesn't look like the audience is not gonna know what the fuck that is, right? So on that day, I was really nervous about all those variables, and then I'm like, I still don't know how to do this, but we figured out a shot. When Cormac falls down there, they hit the button, looks up, the red light doesn't go. And then Mel Gibson goes, where's my fucking shotgun? That wasn't in the script. But that was Mel seeing Kirk and I struggling. And he knows, because he's a filmmaker, I don't know how to convey this to the audience. So he does a fucking Looney Tunes line. Literal. Like it's from a Warner Brothers cartoon. Where's my fucking shotgun? Oh, God.
You know what's great about
that's him knowing,
What's great about that moment, I remember that specifically because Peter was like, oh, we'll come down under the desk. And when Mel did one take where he goes, where's my fucking shotgun? And then he goes, man, I got an idea. And if you watch it, he puts his hand in there and he goes, and he like wiggles it. Where's my fucking shotgun? Like he oversold it, but it was so done well because he's a brilliant actor that the moment.
Yeah, he can get away with something that's a bit, what would be the word for that? A little on the nose. Because I remember after that one take, he's like, maybe it's too much. Maybe no, thanks, man. I don't know, but like we need something.
Well, you know, I wanted to say one quick thing. When I started talking about Ken Christensen, when it was like the rule of don't reveal the high table, right? Well, we have this moment in the third movie when Orson is killed and the phone rings, right? And the adjudicator's on the line, and you know through the dialogue, it's revealed that like, oh shit, she's watching, right? So I have this like, it was a bad idea, but I put in the script, there's like the screens come on, you see these shadowy figures and he says stuff, and I could see Ken Christensen on this Zoom, who, you know, was a little bit more well-rested than me back in Los Angeles. Like, well-rested. He was kind of nodding his head. He was doing that thing like, yeah, and I was really hyped up and overselling it and doing the thing, and then I just got lost in this like sound effects, whatever, and Ken goes, yeah, but you know, John Wick is about games and it's about manipulation. It's about control. And he goes, what if we reveal the high table as a Pong game? Because it's the 70s. And I was just like, oh, man. Like, it was such a great moment because it's so simple. It's so visual. Right. It's also such like a fuck you puppeting moment. Like,
because you see the points. Do you see the points? The 0 to 1, 0 to 2. Yeah.
And yet I was still, you know, I got excited about it. And then like when I pitched it to Albert, I was just hoping that he got excited about it. And I remember him just going, that's dope. And then it became.
I was. And then later I tried to overthink it, remember? And I thought, oh, well. Why don't we just put on like a cool like commercial from the 70s here to fuck with him? And you're like, no, Pong's better. I'm not passionate about this idea.
Yeah. And you know, the question regarding the hotel, it's like that became a big, you know, again, Ken, you know, I always kept saying like, oh God, the show's called The Continental. How do we reveal the character of the Continental? And Ken took it from a real kind of intellectual, more ethereal thought of like, we have to think of this hotel as a sentient being, right? Where its brains, where's the heart, where's the lungs, where's the, you know, everything. So then we began breaking it out like, oh, the armory, the armory that we never see is, kind of the heart of it. And the pneumatic tubes are the lungs. Orson's space is the eyes. And, and when you geek out over stuff like that, then you can kind of really, you heighten and explore it. And it became just this, then Albert gets involved in how he's going to shoot it and what it's going to look like. Then a production designer. And before you know it, it's like, oh, man, we're stepping towards something great here where you feel like you're really digging into a character. And
what I loved about, like, Kirk turned me onto your guys' video and seeing the two of you being more well versed in John Wick and the one just being a casual fan. Like, I was a casual John Wick fan, love it, but I'm not like I wasn't into the details until we got into this. I go, well, I hope people get it, because through all the noise, when it comes out, there's a lot of noise around it. Whether it's positive or negative, or who cast that, or what does this look like, or where's John Wick? It could be anything. And will people get what we're doing, And I still don't know the answer to it because I live in Europe. But it was like really a breath of fresh air when he told me about your guys' video, because it's like when you see someone reacting to something and they're picking up on little details, like, oh my God, they know what they're actually looking at, instead of like the 33%.
Well, because it's just fun finding those little things that are in there that like, that could mean this or that could mean that. So, and it, like, what I really loved about it is it was really story driven. As much action as there was, it was a lot of story to tell there, and that's what I really loved about the show, is that you had the action, which was great, but I just love the overwhelming story of it all. I thought that was just brilliant, because I did wonder, how did Winston rise to power? And I thought, was it from within or whatever? And here we find out, it's from the outside, and, kind of did his own thing, and, got up, and it was nice, the reveal of what happened when they were the kids and what all happened with that. So I thought it was just brilliantly told.
Yeah, the pace.
So, like, we don't have the luxury of like what the Wick films had. It's like, it's a very simple revenge story, with one man going through a killing spree, basically, right? And it happens to be Keanu Reeves. That's kind of irreplaceable. And then you get into this TV space, that's hybrid, where you actually have to introduce all these characters and all this story. And it feels like sometimes we have our hands tied behind our back in a way, because you have to do a lot of heavy lifting. And you have to give the audience the action, and you have to give them this, and you have to give them that, blah, blah, blah. And then, how are they going to take these needle drops, because John Wick isn't big on needle drops. And to the fourth one, I think they had a couple in there. I don't think they had any in the other three, right? By the way, the third one's my favorite, just so you guys know. John Wick 3 is like fun.
That first one here.
Yeah, well, and the thing,
you guys are two?
Sorry, go ahead.
You guys like two?
I'm a fan of all, but
First
the
one's
first
for
one.
me.
The real hardcore John Wick fans, always it's one. It's one first, then it goes to 4, I've noticed, then to 2.
Yeah, all 4 to me are just brilliant.
And then
I'm 3. I like 3, 1, 4, 2.
Oh, come on, Kurt. That is bull. I used to like you.
I'm 3, 2, 1, 4.
My apologies, gentlemen. Before we keep going on, I'm going to go get another headset out of the house quick, because this one is giving me static in my left, and I'm clearing my right. So I'm just going to get another one quick.
Keep going.
See, hey, what did we just tell you guys about problems can happen to us all the time?
Anytime.
He always makes the joke the universe hates us.
I have a bunch of dogs running around my house, and I did some volunteer photography work at a shelter around here. And so the whole premise of like, and I'm a muscle car guy too, which I've got some car questions eventually, if you guys don't mind. But the premise of, well, they killed the guy's dog and stole his car, and I think he rolled through 77 or 84, 87. It's one of those like 3 numbers, like. They messed with his dog, so he rolled through like 80 dudes. I'm like, that's the most simple movie plot you could have. And it's interesting because when people ask like what we do for reactions, I'm like, well, imagine you're watching, because a lot of my friends, like, they're like, we don't get it. Like, people watch you watching movies. I'm like, well, we watch movies like you would a sporting event, a live sporting event. If I'm at a Green Bay Packers game and they score a touchdown, I'm not going to the person next to me. Oh yeah, that was awesome. Did you see that? I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
And this was long before we did reactions. When I saw the first John Wick in the theaters, I was reacting in the theater how we do on our channel, like to the point where I'm like, oh, people are going to be quiet, tell me to be quiet, but everybody else was too. And I'm like, yeah, and you're like,
it's a personalities too.
Part of you almost feel bad, like you're just out there like supporting the violence, but like you don't mind because like they took out his puppy, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, there, go get 10 more, And it was for me.
My wife didn't want to see that part, but she fully would do the same thing. She's like, I'll watch guys get killed all the time on the movie. I don't care, but you hurt an animal, and so that's
the girl I was dating at the time wasn't like really like a gun person. She didn't like guns at all, and but during the movie she was like, yeah. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, the women base for John Wick is huge.
Yeah, well,
it's unlike any other action franchise because of two things: the puppy and Keanu.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's you get twofold there.
Well, the thing that I love that you guys just touched on briefly a second ago was having to kind of do the fan service a little bit, and like I said, with me being a casual fan, to write and do the Continental where somebody doesn't have to be a super diehard John Wick fan to enjoy the experience, because Oak and I run into that a little bit when we do the Marvel movies. People are like, oh, you don't recognize this agent from this obscure show that somebody didn't watch. What's the matter with you guys? Go back and watch whatever. And I just like that with the Continental, you could dive into that and you got it right away. And it had that great feeling, and the story was kind of told where you didn't have to rely on so much previous info.
I have a question just about the story. I remember when Dave was telling us, hey, there's a show coming out, Continental. It's going to be 3 parts, and I'm like, 3? I'm like, that's interesting, because usually it's like you hear 6 or 8 or 10, or it's like The Irishman. It's a 3-hour and 45-minute long movie. But I was like, 3 is interesting. Talk to us a little bit about it being 3.
But was that before you knew it was like 90 minutes per episode? Did you think 3-hour long when you first heard that?
Yes. Yeah,
I honestly, me, because when it was being released, right, for, hey, Continental Peacock, like in my head, I'm thinking 3-part series. And when I see that, I'm like, oh, these have to be at least 60-minute episodes. I can't imagine it being 45, but if it is, cool. Mm-hmm. But I got to imagine it's 60. But you guys actually were able to give us more than 60.
That would have been 45. That slap in the face.
Yeah. Was at any point, was it, because we hear so much, about, some of these projects coming out. We follow a lot of, movies that go into live action on Netflix or whatever. And it's interesting to see how they play them out. Mason Quinn and I did Rings of Power, and I think they did. Yeah. So we'd rather not do that. 8 episodes. But and there was rumor, hey, we're going to do this many. I mean, was it always 3? Was that the from the get go? It's going to be 3, or?
I'll tell you. Originally, it was 10 episodes.
Wow.
And there was a writer's room created to break 10 episodes, and
interesting.
Halfway through the writer's room, we received a call, and the powers that be said, we want to do an old school movie of the week model and make this movies, which was kind of an explosion in the room in a way where you go, oh my God, wait a minute. Like, Winston's falling in love with this girl. Miles and Yen are going to have her. Like, you had all these relationships that you just had to go.
But also, to be fair, part of the thing that we're finding out now is the audience is not programmed for that.
That's why no matter how much you say it. Yeah, it threw me off a little.
But even the ones that are like, I binge watch a lot of things. Like I did my last season of when I did Breaking Bad, because I wait for everything to finish. I did 10 hours straight of the last season of Breaking Bad. I'll do five episodes, no problem. I'll do 5 hours, no problem. Right? 10 is pushing it. But when people feel like they don't have control over their hour, it rejiggers their mind in a way. Like, what's going on here, right? So there was a lot of confusion out there about the length of these episodes, even though it was in writing and it was. if you looked deep enough or did a Google search, you would find out the length of them. People don't want to go do a deep dive. They want to assume it's a TV show. And we are still like segueing into this like hybrid of feature filmmaking and TV coming together now. And it's happening more and more. But it's still a thing that we have to Kirk and I have to swallow. Like, did we do the right thing for the audience that's so pre-programmed? Should it have been 8 or 10? I enjoyed it. I love it. I have no regrets over it, but I don't think the audience is quite ready yet, you know?
Yeah. It was, it was a journey because then COVID hit and we in the writer's room, went to Zoom, and certain people put their pencils down and we're like, this is a disaster. Like, we're going to now have to re-break all of these. And it was myself, Greg Coolidge, and Ken Christensen that spent 37 days re-breaking 10 episodes into 3 movie outlines. Like, it was a stressful time.
So then when did you guys really start it then? When did this like all really start that this was coming to be?
Well, then one movie was, then it was like, oh, you greenlight. Then one movie was greenlit. With the show was greenlit, we had kind of one script. We didn't have the 2 other movies. We just had 2 very loose outlines. And, when you don't deeply outline something, it can sound great in story beats. It's like, he does this and he does that. Then when you really get into breaking it and you're like, oh my gosh, we're building towards this massive takeover in this short amount of time. How do we service?
And meanwhile, we're in Budapest and we have the studio saying, well, we're not going to give you the days we said we're going to give you for episode 2 and 3. And I'm like, well, you guys signed me telling me, because it was a healthy schedule and healthy prep, and we weren't like TV where you roll into the next episode the next week and start shooting. We had 4 weeks in between each episode and a 14-week prep before episode 1. So they started coming down saying, it's the usual stuff. We need to cut corners, cut budget. I was going kicking and screaming. I'm like, do you guys understand that the 3rd episode, you can't cut the days in the 3rd episode? It's more complicated than those first 2. Yeah. Like, what are you guys thinking? Well, remember this, Kirk? Do we need the rooftop fight? Do we need, can't they just fight like in a hallway? Do we need the escape pod? Yeah. Do we need that?
Wow.
No, we fought, like, there was a moment. And it was Albert and myself and Drew, and I think Marshall, Drew, our production designer, in this room. And by the time we got to the 3rd movie, we were beaten up. And as Albert says, it was Christmas every day, but we were exhausted. Like, we were beaten down. And we were like, you know what? We just don't do this rooftop sequence. We had talked about it prior to this meeting. And Drew, our production designer, like, took his mask off and like pulled it down like this, slow pushing on his face, and he was like, "Oh no, we're doing the rooftop. I will find a way. We have to do the rooftop."
And he said, "We have money for production design, you guys, because every movie takes its losses. Every director or producer or writer at a certain point goes, no use fighting this fight anymore, this rooftop shit." Right. So we were at that point from sheer exhaustion. We're like, fuck it. Do we need a rooftop?
Right.
And he's like, guys, we have the money in the budget. And if we don't, I'll find it. And had he not said that, we can't give ourselves credit. Kirk can give himself credit for writing it. But that would have been a fucked up hallway. Had he not said that.
And let me tell you, my office at Stern Studios in Budapest, for the 3rd movie, my office was right next to the soundstage where they were building the rooftop. Oh. And I would kind of go look at it. And then one day, Juji, is that how you say your name, Albert? Mm-hmm. Juji was like, hey, you can do a walkthrough of the roof now. It's done. So corny to say this, but I will say it. And I walked up on that roof and tears, like I got tears in my eyes, because I was like, oh my God, this is epic. It's beautiful. It's to scale. There's a working fireplace. There's a pond.
But this is also to the point of like the escape pod that shows up in episode 3, which was something we were geeking off, like this very Art Deco kind of thing. And we're talking to Drew about it. and I'm not going to mention any names, but again, this is where you don't have the right teammate sometimes on your team. Some monkey motherfucker was like, we could just do that in VFX. Me and Kirk are like, what? Like, nobody even asked if you needed cut corners. Like, why would you even present that as an option? And by the way, I'm already knowing this monkey motherfucker in my head. Like, there's nothing in his past that has VFX in it, so why would he say that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And Drew's like, no, we're building it. We're building it. And the day that we all went there, I think it was the first time we saw it, Kirk, because they had to build the tracks. This was like a factory that I forgot what it used to make.
It was called Budafaki.
Yeah, it was called Budafaki. Okay, this water treatment facility or something like that, right? Where that subway track, like they had to build the tracks, then bring that thing that they built, and the guy who operates it is behind the chair that's in there, right? And it doesn't have brakes, and it's a real engine that is a gas powered, and he has to take his foot off the gas, and hopefully it stops in frame, basically, right? So the first time it pulls up. The first time it pulls up, I've rarely ever seen this where the whole set just stops and they're like, what? People are like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is crazy. And it's only I think only 30 seconds of screen time.
Sure. Yeah.
but it helped us with the one thing, you guys know, the hand.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So I got a question for sorry, go ahead, Kirk.
What's that?
Oh, go for it.
Oh, that was like an 11th hour, how Albert had to shoot the shit out of this thing, but not like in a masturbatory way. Like, he had to shoot it so it looked cool. We had to show it, but it had to be quick because, within the story, the building going to collapse. Right. And we had written.
You mean the one-liner, Kirk?
What's that?
Are you talking about the one-liner or the
No, I'll get to that, that corniness. But he I think he picked up Cormac's hand and drug it over to the track, and then Albert was like, dude, but you're revealing it. Like, we can't do it. It was like, well, how do we know? And Colin will have Colin, who played Winston, look down and just we knew it was going to work. But then I came up with this idea when I was writing all the ADR for the
announcers.
Yeah,
the announcer voices.
Pod has arrived. I was looking online at Subway jargon to just steal on YouTube, and I clicked on this thing, and this voice said, "Please keep your hands and feet away from the track."
But you remember, it was all triggered by, it was like a gang up of ideas and people having a problem.
Yeah,
and I said, I only said to Kirk, I said, I think this woman voice for the hotel can help here. Yeah. And then he went off and found that.
Right.
And then he comes and puts the hand down in the control room. and Sharon says, how did you do that? And of course, 80s wants its line back. Kirk had, Cormac gave me a hand.
Yes! Oh, yes.
That's classic one-liner.
Albert
with
was
a tear in his eye. Just so happy.
And I remember Albert was like, "No, dog." No, he was laughing, but he was laughing when he was saying it. I was like, "No, it's cool."
Well, it was written in the notes. Remember, it says the 80s once it called and once it's lying back.
My friend is dead tired.
Oh, this is the best.
Well, I mean, Mel did some ad libs that were very much like when the adjudicator calls up and says, "Orson." No, he's got his mind on other things. I knew he was going to do that, Kirk. Did you not know he was going to say something like that? Yeah. Like, that was just too fucking easy.
Here you go.
That whole, I've told this story many times, but I love that the final moment when Cormac is facing off with Winston before KD arrives. That was like a 2-page scene, and
dialogue.
When you get down to that moment, I understand from a development point of view, development executive's job is to make sure everything's there, right? And it became too many cooks in the kitchen and on the nose dialogue, and Katie and Winston had a scene, and then Katie was going to put lighter fluid on Mel and light him on fire. And Albert was just shaking.
That was the original scene. He was going
she was going to say
that would have been wild.
I mean, that would have been cool too, I guess.
But I remember Albert saying, "Dude, we have 5 endings." we have 5 endings right now. We have 5 endings. He kept saying that. And testament, credit to Mel's experience. I was driving in that day and we were going to shoot that. And Mel doesn't like to do, he's one of the greatest action stars ever. He doesn't spend a lot of time doing stunts rehearsal, but he'll work prior to doing it, and he's phenomenal at it. No, I'll put my hands like this and I'll do this. And I was watching the scene from Lethal Weapon 2, the final fight scene at the docks, which is one of my favorite sequences because it's all just musical score and it's just tension and the knife. And I was watching that because Mel was going, we were going to choreograph that day and I wanted to have some ideas in my mind. And I got out of my car and I hear, "Hey, Kirk, I got some ideas." And it was Mel. And I was like walking towards him, like so surreal. But it was a great moment because he put the script down. He said, "Look, I've been here before with sequences like this," and he was being polite, which was, "This is a fucking mess," right? And I said, "Look, Albert and I have feelings about this. We're open for anything." And he came up with condensing that sequence before we presented it to Albert. He came up with, "I did something to you, didn't I?" And she had this like total 80s one-liner that I wrote, and he was like, "Yeah, that's that line," she says. And he goes, "What if I say, 'I did something to you, didn't I?'" And then she says, "Yeah." And she pulls the trigger. And I was like, I literally put my hands on my knees. I'm like, this has taken me 2 weeks to get to this point. And an action star who's
done it all,
pivoted the genre.
We were learning this lesson too. Like he's saying, like it's true. Even on movies, these executives put everything on the nose. It's all in there. So even the scene after that at the bar with Winston, once all the battle ends and everybody converges on the bar, which I called the Avengers scene.
That was Albert's idea.
Yeah,
that was all Albert's idea.
But it was. Remember, we had all this dialogue in there, and I started talking to Kirk. I'm like, we don't need it. Let's talk to, because now we have to talk to Colin, who's Winston, and a lot of times younger actors are very precious about wanting to keep their dialogue, and it just looks, you guys, like this is the Avengers coming together and just having looks, and it truly was a full dialogue scene, as was the one he brought up. And again, this comes from like experience. It also comes with great collaborators, like, trusting that it's an audio visual medium. It's not radio.
Yeah, and I loved the finish that you guys did with Mel there and KD in that scene, because so often we've seen in movies they go into, like you said, a 10-minute dialogue of what happened, and it shocks the audience when she's just boom and that's it.
Yeah, it threw me off. I mean, the first shot, where he didn't even realize, and it's like, wait, and then I'm waiting for something to happen, and then it was just pop, and I was like, whoa, you get so accustomed to there has to be some big battle at the end with the main bad guy. And the battle was going on throughout the whole hotel. But when there was that final confrontation, I was really shocked. Like at it. It was one, and then, there's another one. And, hey.
You guys, are you guys fans of Sergio Leone?
Yes, yeah, the Dollars trilogy.
So
I remember something.
Yes, so the greatest thing about him, there's a lot of great things, including Ennio Morricone scores. But if you really look at his so-called action scenes, it's all about the tension, build up, and then boom, boom, it's over, right? Even the Henry Fonda death in Once Upon a Time in the West was all that harmonica man build up and them looking at each other, and all of a sudden, boom, Henry Fonda falls to the ground and then turns over, and then Bronson walks up to him. And he just goes, "Who are you?" Pulls out the harmonica and shoves it in his mouth. And the sound that comes out of it makes him go, and he dies. And he dies.
Less is more.
But Leone was like, and that was kind of the struggle with this film series and the TV space is like the John Wick fans are used to this like action overload, 20-minute long, 10-minute long sequences, which Keanu and Chad do better than anybody, right? And I'm from a school of like, don't overstay your welcome. Like, just do what you do well and other people can help you, but also we're not Chad and we're not Keanu. We're not going to be able to get away, especially with characters that the audience doesn't know already.
Yep.
You know, a younger Winston even is not a character they know yet, you know. So we constantly had this in our mind too, is like we just can't overstay our welcome.
Yeah.
With the music. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kirk.
No. It was interesting because I was reading about romantic comedies recently, right? This goes into what we were saying, and I was reading about the structure and the format of iconic romantic comedies, and it's like once the girl and the boy kiss, right, and they come together, your movie is over.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
It's over. You can't hang out. And I was like, oh, that's you know, hearkening back to that at the moment of this is like once that bullet goes in his head and he's dead, the monster is dead.
It's about the chase.
Yeah.
Big bad wish. But
Let's
Dave, you
wrap-
brought up music. That's one thing we haven't talked about.
Yes.
Yeah, music.
Yeah.
The music.
The music.
was,
God. Could you
So
have done
there
any
was a-
better? I don't think he could.
There was a lot of bangers in there. And Albert, I heard that your favorite band is Pink Floyd, and you guys managed to get a Pink Floyd song in there. So how did that all come about? Give us some details behind the music, because it sounds like the soundtracks were, I don't know how easy or hard they are to get.
How old are all of you?
I'm
You're
44,
Quinn, right?
Yeah.
I'm 44 also.
39.
38.
Okay. So you guys are the 30-year-old guys aren't in our generation, but the 44-year-old guys are in our generation.
I was born in 70. I was born in 79. So
84, baby.
Yeah.
85.
Same with my girlfriend. 84 was an amazing year for music, first of all.
Great.
Dude, I don't want to get off into that. Okay, so let's start with Pink Floyd first. There are 3 tracks. There's more than 3 tracks that Kirk picked. He picked 4 that I know of off the top of my head, right? Ironically, they were all the end credit songs from the Ozzy Osbourne thing, from what's the other one in episode 2, Kirk? Romeo song. So you think you're a Romeo?
Long Way Home.
Wrong Way Home to Ace Frehley's New York Groove. And there's a tunnel scene in episode 2. Mind you, like I've had a 10.5-hour playlist created well in prep from my childhood, because I grew up in a biracial house. My father was black, and all my early movies were R&B or hip hop. But I never got to tap into my mother's classic rock side, or David Bowie, or Pink Floyd. And Pink Floyd's one of my favorite bands of all time. Like, I think they're better than the Beatles. They're better than Led Zeppelin. I don't care who says what. Roger Waters and David Gilmour together, particularly, right? So we get to episode 2, and Kirk, when he's Kramer or Gary Busey, he has this bad habit of, like, if there's a problem, he's obsessing over solving it now. And I'm like, dude, here's something I learned later in my life. The back of your brain knows that you have a problem, and it will process it while you're going about your day, and the answer will drop in. Just wait, Kirk. And it was a scene in the tunnels where Maisie's letting Winston escape, and I was thinking about some score. We were going back and forth, and he was obsessing over it. And finally, he goes, "Welcome to the machine. I just tried it with my phone. I think it's going to work." I go, dude, first of all, you're killing me, man, because it's not even my episode that I directed. Even that episode, Pink Floyd, you're killing me, right? So we lay it in with the music supervisor, and we're like, let's keep dragging that forward into the next scene and see how far we can take this. And it kept going and going and going. Now, it's the most expensive needle drop in the whole series. And traditionally, Pink Floyd has never been licensed, because way back before music was dead, making money, they would never approve it. And we had to get it personally approved by Roger Waters.
Oh, wow.
Right?
you had to like for the
Yeah, he was on tour. He was on tour, and our music supervisor knew someone's goddaughter that was related to him or something. And we had to wait about a week. And those were things like, of course, I had a lot of songs that I loved growing up. And like I said, we had 10.5 hours of music, but finding a place to put them all is tricky, because we also knew it was a multi-genre type of stuff. Like, is this Iggy Pop song going to work against James Brown coming up, or this crazy corny disco song about "Yes, Sir, I Can Boogie"? Is all this going to work together? And I thought it would, because of New York, because that's what New York is. L.A. If it was an L.A. movie in the 70s, I don't know, or if it, even your guys' part of town, who knows? New York is just such an eclectic mix, where you have to mix with people and hear things and smell things. So, and it was really not cheap. And God bless Lionsgate. Lionsgate really stepped up. Normally what they do, and no matter what your budget is they start to question a few of your picks. You sure we should spend this extra money here? That's just a car driving by with Chicago playing, If You Leave Me Now, right? Or another car driving by with a Fight the Power by the Isley Brothers. It's a car driving by. You guys sure you want to spend that many thousands of... They never once sat down and said no.
Never got it.
That was one
Never
thing.
got to know.
That was one thing I really loved was how you guys would do the continuation of the music from outside into a van into the building. You know, maybe it's been done before, but I don't really recall it, at least recently. And I thought that was
and then hearing it, you know, clear then muffled, you know, and stuff like that. That's always fun.
That was actually give my credit to my editor.
Okay,
my editor did that. I picked the track, the ZZ Top track for the reveal of the Mustang, right? Yes. And I really, really want it from the Rivers of Babylon by Boney M. Because it's just dope and corny. Okay. And I said, here's the two choices. And then I get to the editing room and he does that thing where it goes into the radio of the bus. And because these TV editors, and he's a film editor too, they do so much TV. Sometimes TV is a little bit more experimental with some of these things. With some things. And there, you know what TV is really great at? Is cross-cutting between two timelines or two characters doing something. We use it in the movies, but they've lost the art of doing that. Like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, I think Mayhew looking at her apartment while Lou is dealing with the Chinese boy throwing a rock in the window. And you're cross-cutting two storylines against each other. And TV's really advanced at that, at compressing time. Because you guys are dealing with a 45-minute or an hour episode, like you said.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite sequences in Night 2 musically is the Jerry Rafferty Baker Street, the song you're talking about.
Oh yeah, and which makes it feel like a montage, like you said, Kirk. Yeah. He kept calling it a montage. She's like, that montage. Like, Kirk, it's actually not a montage. The editor just stretched the music over 3 or 4 scenes, and it feels like a montage.
I didn't like it at first. When I first saw the cut, I was like, oh, what? I love the song. But it really has a style, and the editor did it in twice in that movie with a Harry Nilsson song as well. When With or Without You during the fight scene, during the theater massacre, right? It was done so well.
When you're choosing music, is it something? And I know this is like a real loose correlation. Like when I competed for a lot of years as a bodybuilder, it's you got a contest coming up. It's never wait your 8 weeks before the show and say, okay, I got to pick music to pose to or to present to for the show. It was never that. It'd be like you'd be driving around like on a random Tuesday, and a song would come on the radio, and you'd be like, oh, this would be cool to do a posing routine to, or even me doing, video edits of other competitors and stuff like that. It was never like, okay, I need a song, I got to find it every once in a while. But usually it was like, you get this bank of songs in your head that would be cool to use for stuff. When you're thinking of a movie, is it like, okay, I have this scene, I got to find a song that fits? Or are you constantly listening for music and thinking this could fit this kind of scene? What does that process look like? And not to go too much back into your history, Albert, but some of the things that you've produced before are known for their incredible soundtracks, and so you've really established.
It's all the above, though. It's like what you would hope for is that you would know what the music is before you shoot the scene. Because sometimes that's helpful for the actors or the camera movement and blah, blah, blah. And I would say 30 or 40% of it's laid in and the shot list, and then Kirk would write it into the script sometime. Or Kirk would say, oh, you sure you want that one? How about this? And then we start to put it in the script, and when inevitably happens, and I don't know if this has happened, and I would love to know from you if this happens for your posing thing, right? Is you think it's going to be dope. And it's not
all the time. All the time. Sometimes you don't even know until you walk after the show. You watch it after, and you're like, I actually did. I wore this shirt. I saw one of your interviews where you talked about meeting Prince. Yeah, and I'm like, I got like a massive T-shirt collection. I'm like, what shirt would I wear today? Purple Rain. I actually posed to Purple Rain. He passed, I think, a week or two. Oh my God! He passed a week or two. Incredible. He passed a week or two before one of my competitions. I ordered a pair of purple trunks.
Dave, 1984, Purple Rain came out, summer of 1984.
My purple trunks came in like a week before. There was a massive, It was not. It wasn't.
This is incredible.
It wasn't good. They were too small. I still wore them. It was bad. It was bad. But in any regard, I posed
a ballad. You went for a ballad.
I posed.
I love it
because you could do like AC/DC or you can do artsy stuff, and I'm like, this is going to be so cool. I'm going to pose to Purple Rain, and then afterwards, and I love the song so much. Afterwards, I watch it, and I'm like, man, I just did a massive disservice to Prince there. My trunks didn't fit right. It just didn't flow.
You don't have the benefit of the edit of like, it doesn't work. Let's get something else.
No, I just went with it. But I've always, like I was watching, and through my 80s, I know it's a 70s song, but I'm a huge Heart fan. And ironically, What About Love? There's a couple like bodybuilders who have posed to What About Love that have been like the most famous posing routines in history. But so I'm a huge Heart fan. So when Barracuda came on during the hotel scene, I was like, how did these guys, like, there's so many songs. And
well, can we pause on Barracuda for a second?
Yeah.
That originally, and it broke our fucking hearts. We got rejected only twice by an estate. The Cars, Let the Good Times Roll. Oh, that was the original song. And when you watch that scene with The Cars, Let the Good Times Roll, like, oh my God, it's so awesome because it's counter to what's going on.
Right.
And the Barracuda's been used in Charlie's Angels, awesome song, and been used in a few other things, right? But like, the Cars were like, the estate was like, no, because of the violence. And then in episode 2, when we introduced Jenkins, the original thing was Psycho Killer by who, Kirk? Who's the song?
Talking
Psycho
Heads.
Killer? Talking Heads. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got a song called Psycho Killer that the estate is like, no, because you're killing someone. And like, and then you have the Cars, a rock and roll band. I think this is punk and this is rock and roll, whatever you want to call it, right? Saying no because of violence. Like, what happened to rock and roll?
Right. Yeah, that's a little too rock and roll for us, but it worked. And I was just like, how did this song? And I know we've all kind of talked about this. It's like every song felt perfect, and there's only a handful of movies we watched. We recently did an animated thing, Mastermind.
No, Megamind.
Excuse me, Megamind. And they went off, and Mason Quinn and all of us were like, man, they really nailed everything. Bangers. And it felt like that with all 3 movies. Is like the music was just like so perfect for the scenes, what was going on. It felt like with the way everything was shot in the 70s, it just worked. Mm-hmm. And it's just I was just like, man,
well, I think
this music.
I think also it was like I knew when I talked to Kirk, we don't have Keanu Reeves. Okay, so we need to get you guys into a place where like, I know this song, or it's an obscure B-side, and you're like, this is like a comfort blanket for me.
Yeah, dude, it brings you in.
It's not like it brings you in. Like, I don't have a familiar face like Keanu Reeves to take me through this, but I do have these needle drops, and some of them are obscure, some of them are pop on purpose. Like, we have to hit the pop stuff. So it draws you into the time period and makes you feel comfortable. And then, there's a flip side of it. Like, I think some of the chatter could be out there. It's like, well, there's too many of them, or it's mixed too loud, or it's, I'm reading some of these 33% motherfuckers, right? So I think to myself, I was like, well, it's part of it's part of the filmmaking style. It's part of the character of the show. We are not The Crown. We are not This Is Us or whatever. We're not those shows. We're a different show. So, get with it or get acquitted. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's like you either get with the program and buy into it or don't buy into it.
Yeah, I thought of it as kind of a love letter to the 70s music.
It is. And in your age group in particular, it's like I'm interested in the 35 to 38-year-olds because it's like, how familiar is some of this stuff to your age group? Yeah. That's interesting, Well,
I think a lot of this stuff is like, it's funny. My entire, I shouldn't say entire, but most of my favorite music now is the stuff that my oldest brother, who was born in '73, listened to. That's how I became, a huge, granted, I grew up, in the later 80s, but that's how I became such a fan of 80s music. And when you get into the younger generations, some of the music that, my mom listened to us cleaning the house on Saturday mornings and afternoons is what I loved. And so I have to imagine some of the younger audiences have to know some of that music from their parents.
Like my dad listened to oldies, so I heard 70s music on the way to school every day.
Yeah, so I'm guessing even the younger
it's interesting.
Audiences.
Like it's like a majority of them are from what you're saying. Oak, I'm calling you Oak now. The majority of them are from what you're saying because it's like I didn't own those records. my mom was playing those.
Yeah.
When I was 5 years old or 4 years old, like, If You Leave Me Now by Chicago, like, I don't own that fucking record. For some reason, it reminds me of my childhood.
Yes.
Yeah. I you know, when I was a kid, we didn't have a lot of money, and my oldest brother gave me one of those 8-track that spun around, right? And he gave me his old stereo. Music was just something that was on the radio, and I grew up in a small town that didn't have a lot of culture and music and movies and stuff. So I was listening in like second and third grade. I was listening to Santana, Grand Funk Railroad, you know, like all of these oldies and older music from my generation. And I just thought that that was what everyone was listening to. And I mean, there was like a show and tell day where you could bring in music, and like all these kids had like Van Halen or whatever. And I was just like, yeah, this
1984.
Right, 1984. So, you know, one of the
Chicken McNugget, 1984. Summer Olympics, 1984. Revenge of the Nerds, 1984.
Yes.
David Bowie. David Bowie, Let's Dance. So when Albert and I started collaborating on this and geeking out and really bonded, I was like so surprised that he had this, this love for 70s music. And like, whenever I create something, I always just make my own playlist, you know, of just songs that motivate me, like Dirty Deeds and old Iggy Pop tracks, and like whatever, Eagles, whatever the genre is, I'll like playing that, and just because it's emotional, it makes you feel emotional. It's visual, it conjures up images. And then Albert drops this thing he was telling about, this playlist, 200 something tracks, and he really led the charge musically. He picked a lot of tracks for this. So, but
we ran into some trouble too. Like, for instance, like, I don't know how familiar the 30-Year-Old Crew is with that song Popcorn.
Yeah.
You know,
I kind of slightly remember some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was interesting because there was some pushback from some in our crowd about that, right? And it is one of those songs, like, either you love it or hate it, because it can be what's that word where it just gets on your fucking
like
nerves?
An earworm, or is that what they call it?
It can. Earworm. Yeah, it can just grate you. Okay. Or it can put you in a time period of when it came out and the playfulness of it, like how goofy it is, and the kind of synth sounds that are going on there. And I knew that, there may be some people who don't like this, but if they let the scene flow out, maybe they'll see it from another angle. Mm-hmm. I don't know. You know, there are some some ones that are risky, and that was a risky one. And so was the Hip Hugger before that, where Lemmy is shooting those two guys on the road. It's like, it's coming fresh off of like Yen killing the concierge woman, like blowing her brains out. And then there's just like this funky tune that comes next. It's like, okay. But again, this is, to me, it speaks to the John Wick world. It's like, I think sometimes people go into even John Wick too seriously. Like, John Wick is taking a piss out of genre movies, is what it's doing. And it's having fun in a high style way. Mm-hmm. It's winking and nodding to the audience, like, you guys seriously taking this shit seriously, right? Then you have people online talking about the Wick movies on my show, like, well, you can't do that because of the high table or this or this. But it's like, if you pull one thread out of the movies or our show, there is no logic to any of this. If it makes you feel like it feels cool and it's interesting and mysterious, that's great, and you're going along for the ride. But let's be honest, what Chad and Keanu do so well is they have all the same tropes as every other genre movie that's ever been done, but they get a pass because they do it so well, and they do it in an interesting, entertaining way. Mm-hmm. And they flip it on its head too. Like another movie that was a revenge type movie would get bashed by the critics for just being like a straightforward revenge movie. The first one of John Wick didn't. The second, third, and fourth didn't. The critics loved it because they made it in a new, fresh way. Let's be clear, though, it's pretty paper thin, as far as plot and story. But again, this is where I love cinema. It's like, you don't necessarily need all that if you're entertaining the audience.
No, right?
No, it's style. It's style. It's like if you take the movie Taken, right? Liam Neeson.
Oh, loved it. Good luck.
he tells his daughter, "Hey, be careful when you're going to Europe. You might get taken." Right? She goes to Europe and gets taken. But it's
What are the odds? What are the odds?
What are the odds?
Well, when you put it like that,
What are
But
the odds?
it comes down to the moment on the phone of that classic, iconic, right? There's like, I have a specific set of skills. It's like, it's the style, and it's also Liam Neeson was a new action star, right? Suddenly, later in life, he's born, and it's the style of it, and we're along for the ride. What I love about Taken is he's got all these like ex-CIA operatives that he plays golf with, right?
Yeah.
Brotherhood, and they love him. And then his daughter gets taken, and they're like, "Hey, I tracked down some information for you. Best of luck out there." And hangs up. Like, I was like, "What?
help us.
Good luck, pal.
Get on a plane.
Can't do it on this one, but I'll get you this sheet of paper for you. It has all the details.
But it doesn't matter."
Yeah.
I sent it
That's
to
where logic goes out the window. Like
Yeah.
logic goes out the window. Like you can pull apart the TV show and the Wick film series very easily.
Yeah.
Very easily. But it's like, are you buying into this good bedtime story?
That's the thing is, like going for the ride and just being entertained is going to trump anything else.
And the good thing about like John Wick is, Marvel, right? They're coming from the comics, whereas John Wick, it's clean slate. So
Scratch.
we got a lot of like tribalism in these areas, right? For DC, Marvel, you can't really do that. Well, for the most part, I know you mentioned the 33, but for the most part, you can't go back and be like, whoa, the high table did X, Y, and Z. You can't do that here.
Yeah.
We're going to use the 33 from now on.
I wrote that down.
I wrote it down.
33.
There's like the other interesting is like the 33% of motherfucking monkey ass idiots. Okay, the Venn diagram of John Wick. It's an interesting Venn diagram. You have gun nuts, right wingers, women, liberals, dog lovers, action fan, black audience makes up a huge base of it, 30%. Okay, you Venn diagram all that. That makes the John Wick fan. These disparate groups. Like there is no other kind of and Keanu fans. I forgot to mention that because that's a huge part of that Venn diagram, right? And it's interesting because Kirk and I had to like research all this in a way because I came up with a theory outside of the bookends on your show, Dave, and the answer is like it's very rare for me to find a real hardcore singular John Wick fan, like singular, like into all the details. This is my franchise. No other franchise for me. This is it. I'm obsessed with it. It's usually a collection of different taste and people that come together and agree on this kind of movie, which is interesting. I think it's quite unique in that way.
That's
It's a
interesting.
phenomenon.
The Venn diagram. I'm like, a little bit of that, a little bit of that.
And then you have the 33s in there too. Right?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, John Wick alone, like no IP. It was an independent
mentioning.
film. It was originally called Scorn, and it was about it was
I
like
didn't know that.
a Tommy Lee Jones type of hitman, right? He was that age. Like he'd quit the game and his wife gets killed and he gets pulled back in. And when they started developing it, the character's name was John Wick because the writer, Derek Kolstad, his grandfather in real life was named John Wick. And Keanu, this is not like I hang out with Keanu all the times and he tells me this is me doing my research.
If you know Keanu like you know.
Keanu was fascinated with the name John Wick and kept calling the movie John Wick. And it just, Chad Stahelski coming from the Matrix movies and being his stunt double and, that style of filmmaking that he inspired him applying. It's a freak show that this independent film came out. And another fun fact about this movie, talk about love for Keanu Reeves, the movie didn't have enough money and was shut down. Production came to a standstill, and Eva Longoria got a phone call. Hey, they're looking for money to finish this movie, and you've made a lot of money on Desperate Housewives. Do you want to, last money in, first money out if this thing's a success? And she's like, what is it? All the only thing, because I had a meeting with her because I was like, you're credited as a producer, I have to know this story. And she said, oh, I only heard Keanu Reeves. And I was like, oh, I'm in.
That's it.
Right?
What a story.
Which is a testament to the power of Keanu Reeves in a franchise like this.
But by the way, Kirk, the Chuck Spadina thing that you Easter egged on Jenkins, I saw a clip of Keanu with one of the Late Show hosts. It's pronounced Spadina.
Oh, wow. I've been saying it wrong.
Dave and I used to work at a financial institution together, big company, and we had a financial representative whose name was John Wick. And I remember the first time I'm at my screen doing whatever, you know, I dealt with taking some inbound calls from our financial reps and stuff like that. And I'm on my computer, phone comes up, and I just was like, this was like 2017, and I had to stop, and I'm like looking around, everybody else is doing there. I'm like, hello?
Oh, this guy's life must be hell.
It was a white guy, like mid-50s at the time, late 50s, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Hello? I was waiting for I'm back.
Did you guys know that Albert Brooks' real name is Albert Einstein?
Yeah.
I did not know
Brooks.
that.
Oh, not crazy.
All the way through high school, all the way up until he started his career, he changed it then.
Oh, wow.
Michael Douglas.
Michael Keaton.
I mean, not Michael.
Michael Keaton. His real name is Michael Douglas.
He changed it. Yeah, changed it to.
Jesus.
That's crazy.
Maybe Michael B. Jordan should take a hint there.
Yeah. Well, I'll put a B in there. Everybody will get it.
Here's one that'll blow you away. If you're a Henry Rollins fan, his name is Hank Garfield.
Come on, really?
No.
Did not know that.
And he changed it. He took the name Rollins from Sonny Rollins to Henry Rollins. Like, I love it.
Well, it doesn't have quite the same same aggressive ring to it.
Way to go.
It might have been more punk rock, though. Might have been more punk rock to be like, I'm Henry Garfield. Cat.
It
Like
might
the
have.
cat.
That Garfield really knows how to rock out.
Well, and Albert, I'm glad you brought up about how the first John Wick was very simple and at the end, at its heart, it's just a revenge tale, because these guys gave me the hardest time with the rating that I gave it, because I gave it, for John Wick fans, a relatively low rate. I think I gave it like a 4 or a 3.9,
something.
3.75 or something.
Out of what?
Out of 5
answers. Out of 5.
And
it was like a low 3.
And the reason I did that was because I was trying to come at these guys and say, look, you've already seen like 2 and 3, I think, by the time we did 1. And I'm like, you guys, this isn't that like groundbreaking of a movie. It's Keanu being Keanu, taking out a bunch of guys for killing his puppy. It's not like Shawshank or something, you know, of that level. Very good. The action was incredible, and all these guys gave me such a hard time for me looking at
it. Off camera that we got it, so because we went hard on him. Like for me, what attracted me to John Wick, because I didn't see it right away. I knew Keanu was a part of it. It was probably about,
that's what happened with most.
Yeah,
what you're saying.
So like 6 months later, I saw Dave in a post or something talk about. You never kill a person's dog or whatever you said.
I loved it right off the bat. Yeah. I got fired up when I saw it.
Yeah, he saw it. So I'm like, okay, Dave's talking about it now. So finally, I'm going to sit down. There's no one around. And after it, I was hook, line, and sinker because of the style that was presented with the action. I've never seen action.
And then he turned me onto it shortly thereafter before 2 came out, and then we saw 2 in the theater, front row, so we're watching.
Oh, that was
Hey, you see what happened in that corner over there?
This goes to show you about the history of development, how things can go wrong. Dave Leitch co-directed the first movie with Chad, right? And I had worked with Dave on an independent movie in 2002 called Sledge that was made by all stuntmen. So I met all these guys and stayed in touch with them, but I'd kind of lost touch with Dave Leitch. This thing, John Wick, comes out. I see it. I'm like, this is dope. The Hitman genre's flipped on its ear. Like, we've got a new Hitman character. And so I was at Netflix, and I see him, and we hug it out. And I go, dude, I just saw John Wick. I loved it. And I go, we're talking about it. I go, and the dog. And he goes, yeah, that was a battle. That was a battle.
Really?
So the studio was like, no way. No. You can't hang a movie on killing a dog. Got to be the wife. You got to kill the wife.
They've hung 4 movies. Yeah. 4 movies off of a dog.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It would have been totally different.
it would have been a different, because then you get into metaphors of man's best friend and love from the grave, and it becomes this whole
the final gift she gave him was the dog, and he was hesitant at first.
But I think that touches into like people, right? I mean, we see so many memes every day. I'm a big meme person. If you watch the channel, see so many memes.
He was the meme guy.
I like 3 people in this world, and every dog I've ever met. There, it just it doesn't hit.
Well, what about that bad joke? You heard the bad. It's a misogynist joke. But we'll just replace the woman with a person. If you lock a dog and a person in a trunk and come and open that trunk a week later, which one's going to be happy to see you?
Oh, yeah.
I know.
People love
come home
dogs.
drunk at 3 in the morning. Your dog's happy to see you.
Complete opposite of Mason Quinn. I loved the simplicity of it. People were like, what's it about? And I'm like, well, it's not really about much. It's like, they killed his dog, so he rolled through. In the car. For me, it's like the car thing. I get it, and I love cars. And Kirk, I wanted to ask you a question about the car, which I'll get to.
We need to ask
but
about the
I
car.
loved the simplicity. That's what did it for me. I was like, what's the plot? Well, it's pretty simple. Like, they took his dog, and so he went and got revenge. Oh, like on the person who got his dog? No. Like 80 people. Anybody who looked at him wrong on the way to getting his dog. But as far as the car goes, so I'm a old school car guy. Love my muscle cars. So of course, when I saw the car, I was like, oh, Continental. And I know this is a bit of a technical question, but the car gets banged up pretty bad in the first one. The car gets damaged really bad. On the technical side, how does that work with these old cars as far as like, are you going Dukes of Hazzard?
Mustang.
What's that?
The Stang, right?
Yeah, the Mustang, excuse me. Yeah, the Mustang that was John Wick's, and I think we can presume it's his. I have seen some stuff afterwards that they use the same license plate and stuff like that.
Yep.
But like, you hear old stuff about like the Dukes of Hazzard. Oh, they had, I saw a picture of a parking lot of like 100 General Lees that they did for the show.
Yeah.
How does that work with a car like that where the values are pretty sky high right now in shooting a movie where it has to be banged up?
Go, Albert.
I'm picking my podcast, Mike, because I have to tell you a story that breaks my heart, and then I'll let Kirk answer the car question.
No.
I was a big Knight Rider fan.
Oh,
in the
of
80s.
course.
That's huge.
Me too.
Loved Kit.
And we had moved to California in 1980. It came on shortly after that, and my mother got enough money to take us on a Universal Studios tour. And we're on that tram going through Universal Studios, and I see a car trailer. You know those car trailer things where you have the cars in the back? Multiple cars, like 30 cars. I saw 30 kids in the back of a trailer, and I fucking lost it. I lost it. Broke my heart. Kirk, go on the Mustang.
Oh, I see. It threw me off for a second. I thought you lost. Like, oh, there's a bunch of kids that threw you off because you realized it wasn't just one kid. Oh no! Boy, my life is a lie.
broke his heart.
Before we go, Kirk, there's a part 2 I want to roll off of Dave. I can't remember what episode, but there's a Gran Torino in there that looks like it came from Starsky and Hutch. I just will leave that there and let you elaborate.
100%.
Hey, look at that.
Yeah, no, that was
And there's the taxi from Taxi Driver, and there's a graffitied hearse from the
hearse.
Warriors.
Yeah, from the Warriors. Yep, I did see that.
There were 3 69 Mustangs.
Okay.
Beautiful, by the way.
Oh, we only had 3? We only had 3? I thought we had more.
Maybe we had
4 or 5. I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe
You would
we
know
had
better
4.
than me.
I think it's 3. I could be wrong, because to jump forward and then come back, we had to use the hero car, which was the only existing Mustang we had
When you say hero, I'm not familiar with the terms for cars. When you say hero car, what are you referencing?
hero car. So the car, when you first reveal it, when the cover comes off, when Uncle Charlie puts it off, right?
The best looking one that you're not going to damage.
The one you don't wreck.
That's the one it's the hero car. You don't dent, you don't scratch.
It works well. It has the best engine, has the best interior.
Yeah.
All the other ones are like gutted out and we painted them all. They're pieces of shit. And we found them all. We sourced them all over Europe.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and like Albert said, you look inside some of those cars, and it's like, the one that gets rolled just has a roll cage. There's no seats. When they escaped from Uncle Charlie's yard, when it's a double cross, and in the end of episode 1, when Frankie looks over his shoulder and says, "Motherfucker, set us up," right? we had this big sequence where the Mustang does this like half donut and there's an explosion and the car was going to go off this ramp and jump. I mean, it was
very Stephen J. Canal.
Yeah, it was. I was all for it because I love action and I love 80s TV shows with cars in them. Anyways, we were down to three cars, hero car and two others, and the stunt guy, who was an incredible stunt guy, Craig Baxley, he just goosed it too much, and when he went off the ramp, when he went to hit the ramp, he slammed to the wall and buried the tire underneath.
And that was our hero car.
No, that was not a hero car. That was one of our just crash 'em up cars. But because of the damage, Zoltz, our car guy, was like, to fix this, I'm going to have to take it apart. We're going to have to pull it apart. So then we jumped to one of the other existing cars that then had to be rolled, right? And then we only had the hero car left. So there's a sequence where we took the windshield out and put bullet markings on it. And we were using the hero car where it was like, oh my God, if this car breaks down, like just if the engine goes out, we're fucked.
Well, that was the problem where you got to understand, like we're in Central to Eastern Europe, and we have to source all these 70s cars. And me and Kirk are pulling shit out, and this guy, Zolt, who was great, our car guy, right? We need the Starsky and Hutch car. What's a Starsky and Hutch car? Punch it in Google. We need that. And he found it somewhere in Europe.
That's crazy.
Wow. Yeah.
That's just amazing.
Yeah,
how those things come together.
One of my biggest regrets is you can see a 68 Charger in the show. It's parked on the side of the street, right? Dukes of Hazzard car.
Yeah.
Dukes of Hazzard 69, I think. 69 Charger. Anyways, stock, mint condition. And it was like 3 nights before, or a week before we were done. And I was looking at the car and I was talking to our car guy, Zoltz, and I go, if I was going to buy this car, what would you sell it to me for? He's like, oh, let me talk to my guy. So he comes back. He's like, 37 American, right? And I was like,
3,700 or 1,000?
37,000.
Yeah, but
and
for a Charger?
No.
Yeah, this is me not being a detailed car guy. I go, let me think about it. Right?
You should have told me get cross.
Dude,
Like,
but the VW bus was like 120,000.
Dude, I'll give your guy 37,000 tomorrow for a Charger.
Really?
I get back to LA and I met my mechanic, my old mechanic, Boussard, right? And he collects cars. And I'm showing what have you been up to? And I show him the picture. He goes, oh, wow, that's a 69 Charger. Those things are so expensive. I go, I know. I wanted to buy it, but it was 37,000. He goes, 37,000? That car? And he goes, it wasn't stock. I go, no, it was stock down to the serial numbers. He's like, that's $180,000 car.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Easy.
Yeah. And
easy.
if the serial numbers line up like chassis to fucking dash, like it's even more.
Yeah.
I didn't. So I was like, I could have made.
Yeah, you could have flipped that one pretty good.
But you're not factoring in the shipping overseas where they put it on the, that's like $18,000 or some crazy shit.
Yeah, that come out pretty far.
Right, so coming out over 100 G's ahead,
Yeah. Well, and that's so crazy that you would have that story because, I think the three of us for sure, I'm not sure how much these guys are, but the original Interceptor from Mad Max, like they weren't going to do anything with it. It was, I think one of the stuntmen got it and then it just sat and rotted forever. And then somebody finally got it and they put it in the museum and everything. But some of those movie cars, when you look back on it, you're like, well, what are you doing? What do you mean somebody didn't buy the movie car from, Mad Max
or the best one,
stuff?
The best one is there's a place in Los Angeles called the Peterson Automotive Museum.
Yep, Peterson Museum.
Which was Biggie's the last
R.I.P. Biggie. Yeah,
the last party Biggie Smalls went to. I parked the Suburban the day he was shot. That's a whole other story. I always think of Biggie when I think of the Peterson Automotive Museum. But anyways, I've been there several times, and I took my son a while back, and there was a whole floor that was dedicated to movie cars. right? And so the Risky Business Porsche was there. I automatically, like in my mind, which I love, Risky Business. I love that movie. Perfect. One of the best movies of the 80s. Anyways, I was like, in my mind, I went, oh, this can't be, it's a replica or whatever. And there was this huge plaque, and you could scan with your phone this like barcode, and it would tell you the whole story. They shot that movie in Chicago. The car was like borrowed from someone, and then they sold the car off. And this car collector dude tracked down where it was, like a 3-month journey. He finds the house where the Risky Business Porsche is in the driveway with like flat tires. It's great though. And he knocks on the guy's door, and he's like, "Oh, is that a Porsche? Blah blah blah. Yeah, I needed to buy some parts." And the guy was like, "I don't know. I'm thinking about saving it for my son." And he's like, I'll buy. And he goes through this whole thing. The dude didn't know what he had.
Oh yeah,
man.
Knocked the car and restored it. And it's like one of the most valuable because it's the hero car, like the car.
Yeah.
Oh no. I hit up the Comic-Con scene a lot, and it's cool. They'll have the last one I was at in Chicago. They'll have the DeLorean, and usually Kit's there. They had the National Lampoon station wagon and the Ghostbusters vehicle.
The DeLorean one is probably the most interesting flip on what do you call it, like a disaster of a car rollout.
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
There's actually somebody around us here.
We'll see it.
We'll see it on driving down the interstate. We'll be like,
Yeah, we'll see
the
the
DeLorean.
DeLorean.
"Where's Doc Brown?" I guess.
I had one in my neighborhood
one.
in 1984, Dave. 1984.
Well,
Okay,
his
you know.
is done up as a perfect replica, like down to the T. He's
It's got
been
the
all over
vents in the
media.
back, yeah.
Oh,
and
you
stuff
mean
like-
from Back to the Future?
Yeah, so he's got a
Yep, sorry,
DeLorean
yep,
that
I
he's
should've
done
said
a
that, yep.
he's done a full conversion
and
on
then,
it. So you'll just be
coming
going
home
down the
from work.
highway, and all of a sudden he drives by. And it's like, wait,
Coming home from work, I was passed by the Ecto, or I passed the Ecto 1, and it was like perfectly done too for how they had it for Ghostbusters.
Yeah, it's
Just
fun.
down to every detail.
man.
They'll take it to a local minor league baseball team. They'll take it to their stadium every so often so everyone can look at it and sit in it.
I meant to start off this.
What
question.
if-
Go for it.
Well, you guys are, before we get off the car thing, you guys remember the one episode of Knight Rider where there was the what do you call it, his adversary car called
Yeah, the antagonist.
Car. Yeah.
There was Kid, and then there was Car.
Car.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh,
Oh my
fantastic.
God.
Michael. I always loved how snooty Kit was.
Yeah.
Michael.
Oh yeah, and then you find out it's Mr. Feeney, and you're like, "Yep, that's perfect voice for Kit."
Yeah.
and brilliant, like that.
Yeah.
oh,
Iconic.
And one of the best theme songs of the 80s.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
All those theme songs were great. And speaking of
That was
that,
a ringtone of mine for years.
yeah, and I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but they're starting to redo those. Now we see Ryan Gosling and the Fall Guy. I'm wondering, like, what's going to be next from our childhood.
They didn't even use the theme.
No,
they didn't
I
use the theme in
know.
the trailer. It's like, what are you guys doing? That's one of the dopest songs.
Yeah,
Like,
it is. They totally missed the boat. But anyways, that's
and
a
if
whole.
you guys get a chance, if you guys remember, write it down. There's a song that came out in 2003 or 4 from Punjabi MC that has a Knight Rider theme in it.
Yeah.
I think I might have.
Yeah.
I know.
And then there's a remix with Jay-Z rapping on it.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is so dope. Like they took the Knight Rider theme and put a beat on it.
Yeah, well, Busta Rhymes
no,
did.
it's dope.
Busta Rhymes did "Fired Up" with the Knight Rider. Fired up, dun, 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 dun. It starts off. Busta Rhymes.
Oh, that's
did,
right. That's
yeah,
right. That's
Busta
right.
Rhymes. Yeah, that was
Punjabi
cool.
may have beat him though, because the production on this, you're like, this is the way you do it.
Yeah, Dave, you were gonna.
Yeah, so one of the I wanted to start off early, but we got involved in so much great conversation. Is with what we do as reactions, right? I personally do feel, and I know there's a lot of comments that we get that, oh, you're stealing their content and just trying to make money off it. We'll probably throw that in a 3-3 again, but well,
monkey
with,
ass foes.
and I, at least from my perspective, yeah, we probably dip our toe in a gray area, right? Because there's fair use, the copyright from you to us, right? From that perspective, as the showrunners, creator, you guys have your fingers all over this kind of content. What's your viewpoint of reactors doing reactions?
I wish
to
you can
content?
keep it up full. I wish you guys can keep the movie up full time, and not have to dip away.
Yeah, just
You know.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
I think that it's amazing, and it's an amazing kind of a genre. Let's call it what you guys are doing is a genre of like podcasting in a way. And podcasts are huge now, you know. And then you have your characters along with it. People become familiar with what you guys like, what you don't like, what you do in your background, what you do in your day to day. So you guys are hosts. You guys are real personalities, and then you're elevating whatever it is you're watching. Even if you already like it, it's being elevated by seeing it through your eyes. You know, I think it'd be interesting for me. It's like, oh, I would like to watch it first and then see them do it, you know. But I would hope for you guys in the future would be great is like, is there a way that the movie companies was like, yeah, just use whatever you want, keep it up full time, the image. So I don't know, you know, I don't find a problem with it. I think it's a new kind of frontier of this stuff. And we've seen a lot of them, Kirk and I, but you guys was like, not because you like the show or like one or two of it, it doesn't matter. The way you guys do it is it's top tier.
Oh,
yeah, and for me, it's like it's like a test screening in a way.
Oh, that makes sense.
That does make sense. Yeah,
I watched like 10 of them just because, you know, as a storyteller, I want to see if I hear 10 things that people go, what? Or, oh, that bothered me. I'll listen to it and go, well, that bothered like a lot of people, this specific moment they pointed out. So I really like it. And some of them are just
or the laugh that you wanted to get.
Right.
You know, like Kirk doesn't have the benefit I've had in the TV space, and he's done features too. It's like TV space, what I was shocked by is they don't test screen these things.
Yeah.
Every movie I've ever done, you have to do 3 to 5 test screenings with minimum 350 people.
Oh, wow.
And I have to sit in there and you have to go through the pain of it, and you get the 300 cards, and I go home and read every single one of them. And
that's right.
They all write down things they like, the best about what they hated. It's a convergence of opinion. And if we're watching you guys, and let's say we pick out another show like Kirk did, I didn't watch a bunch of them. If you guys are hung up or like something, then it's like, okay, we know that worked. You know, so this is a version for us of a test screening, but we can't do anything if it doesn't work. On a movie, I can do something. And one thing I learned about doing the test screening thing is very painful, but it's very useful. Is that this is what Kirk was dealing with me, what you were dealing with me in Budapest a lot. As I'm like, that won't make sense to the audience. You know, that shape is going to confuse them. I've been through too many of these where one little thing you think is cool, it's not. It's not cool because the shape throws them off, a color throws them off, a line, it can be a word. They like simplicity and kind of the visual sense, you know. And you can't introduce anything to them without explaining it, or it's just a weird kind of gut thing you get after a while. With someone we were working with, Kurt, brought up something to us and showed it to us, and I just looked and I go, no. You know, it was a case, I think, of something shaped like something. No, the audience is going to be no.
Well,
I remember.
Yeah, I mean, you see that a lot in some movies or television shows, movies where they have to walk that fine line of explaining it to the audience, but not hitting them over the head with a shovel, being like, this is the theme we're trying to tell. You know, you can kind of leave it a little bit, and to find that nuance in between's got to be kind of tough.
That's the thing. Like, I was watching, Albert was like, you have to, I had started Fargo and then I stopped it. And he's like, you got to watch Fargo. And I was up too late last night because I got
season 5.
Oh yeah.
I got pulled in Fargo. But in the first season, there's to emphasize your point, this character, the police officer is going to have a baby and the wife is obsessing over the color of the nursery. And he's like, oh, I'm going to go, I'll pick up some paint on the way home. Right. And then the character dies. And it's this great moment of simplicity that is visual, that has emotion, that tells story. When the deputy looks in the back seat of the car and now this guy's dead and you see these 2 paint cans and you go, ah, my God. That's perfect storytelling because those paint cans symbolize birth, the baby, what the wife is waiting for. And she picks up these paint cans and walks towards the house. No dialogue, the wife looks down at the paint cans and the look at the horror on his face, and it says everything. You don't have a big fucking scene about, oh my God, he's dead. And it's like simple visual storytelling. It's like working with our collaboration and Albert's experience coming from that. For me, it was like a big, there was this thing I wanted to do where, the cello.
Oh no.
Right? The cello.
Oh yeah, the pegs.
Yeah. And
that was one.
And this idea was when Cormac pulls a shotgun out, the gun is going to be jammed, and it was going to be a double barrel shotgun, and he was going to pop it open, and the cello pegs from the cello were going to be in it. And Sharon put the cello pegs in that because he killed his friend. Look, on paper in a brainstorm, you're like, this is brilliant. Albert was like, dude, it ain't going to work. And
I was audience would never connect that the shape of those, especially with most of it in the barrel.
Yeah, you'd have to have a flashback or something.
That's me getting burned too many times in test screenings. I was like, that's for sure not going to
happen.
But he pushed it. He was going to the prop guy. He was doing everything.
I went to the prop guy. I had to make an extra big cello peg, put blood on it. I did like a video. I shot it and stuff. And then I remember the moment that I showed out, and Albert goes, but dude, are people going to understand that this is a cello peg? We don't even talk about it. And I was like, you know what? Gone. Gone. But you have to walk through that stuff. You just have to walk through it.
Yeah.
Well, that's also the difference between when you read a written word, and it can read well. Like you see it says cello peg. Just like take for instance, this is what most people miss. There's 2 points on it. In the first episode, KD's introduction, she's riding Mayhew. He's cuffed to the bed. It starts out with a wide shot, then you get to her up shot. And the two things most people miss is you see the burn scars right away.
Yep.
Right? In the script, it's written, she has burn scars. The visual, you're going to, I guess, depending on what size your TV screen is, half the people that watch it don't get that she has a burn there. And they also read into that relationship way off base of what it's not. Like, we had notes coming back like, oh, this is not sexy enough. This is not steamy enough. And I had to do a notes call where they were complaining about, all affairs should have this kind of sexual tension and have this romance. And I go, okay, everybody on the Zoom right now, and it was like 10 people. I go, how many of you are willing to admit you've had affairs? I am. I've had several of them. And let me tell you, they're utilitarian most time. Okay. It's not about romance or anything. I'm just trying to get my rocks off. Right. You guys are reading this wrong too. If you look at the way the actress played it, Michelle Prada, she has disdain for him.
Yeah, she did a great job.
She doesn't have any respect for him. He's an ends to a means to an ends. Whatever she can do to get the information she needs to get to the end result, right? And what most people don't realize also, I shouldn't say it like that. 50% of the people who see the show are bothered by her character. And I understand why, because she's ruining all the fun. This cop showing up, snooping around. The John Wick world, she's ruining all the reindeer games. And the other half are like, there's something going on with her that's deeper than what we're seeing, basically, right? And they totally get it, basically, right? So that's a very interesting thing that can happen when I read the script and I read the burn scars. And then we get to the second episode and there's a Molotov cocktail being thrown out. I thought it was smart. I'm like, oh my God, I know she's connected to this.
Yeah.
But in the visual of it, more than half don't make the connection.
I think you said it. I don't think, if I remember.
I don't
remember us getting it.
I think I saw it on her,
we knew
on her wrist, maybe.
Scar.
I think was where I first saw it. If she had him on her wrist, maybe.
Yeah, no, it was all going down
the
shoulder and neck right here.
Yep. So I remember us strictly calling out, oh, she's got some burn scars. But when episode 2, like you just mentioned there, with the fire, my brain, I know for sure we didn't say, oh, duh. I think it was the third
catch that
episode
right away.
Where we connected dots.
Yeah.
And then we also did something quite strange, and I don't know if it was done on purpose, Kirk, because we had different prologues before and we had flashbacks. It's like the prologues are actually in reverse. They're not in chronological order. They're actually, the third episode start backwards. That's the chronological order.
Oh, okay.
No, that was just something we found.
Yeah,
we had a lot of flashbacks in the scene in the script. Too many in our script, and Albert was the first one to go. We got to kill these. We've got to kill these, because it becomes a crutch.
Right.
When when you're creating narrative and you're like, oh, I need exposition, I know, I'll just flash back.
But Kirk, remember once we sold it to Peacock, there was a note that came back when she confronts him. KD confronts Winston in the room with the lighter fluid. They came back with a note like, you should flash back to the burning building. And we're like, if people have watched the first 2 episodes, they know exactly why she's there. Again, this is like notes.
I just saw for the cello peg scene, he just right in cello pegs with an arrow pointing at him. That would have given us a perfect, idea of what was in there. And then say from Sharon.
Cello pegs.
Acme cello pegs.
I want to give you guys your flowers here for the 3 episodes you did for this, because you guys did so many little things that connected to John Wick while still making its own universe, while world building this, and still distancing yourself from the Wick movies. So props to you guys on that. I want to ask, how difficult...
Because sometimes we get slapped up for doing that. So thank you.
Hey, at least in my opinion, that was pure awesomeness. And I know we complain sometimes, like, why are we getting a remake? You guys didn't give us a remake. You guys gave us a whole fresh new story based on another IP over here, but you world build it. So I appreciate that. So thank you.
Plus, Winston is an amazing character in and of himself. So just to find out his story was amazing too. So.
And so with that, with day 1, let's just say episode 1, movie 1, you have that script. It's both of you are like, hell yes, this is money right here. Now, it's starting to filter through people. How do you guys handle that situation where somebody comes in and be like,
I got notes.
We got notes. How does that, how do you guys handle that situation? Because I'm sure day 1 versus day 40 will say it has to be kind of frustrating sometimes.
Kirk dealt with a lot of it before I came on, and it was a bad, not bad. I mean, like, it's a bad process if you're in it for a long, long time, which he was in it for like 2.5 years. One thing I will say to, and Kirk has heard me say, you actually do need the adversarial side of that, because they may not be right, but they make you question things. And sometimes it gets too much, and it's silliness, and it goes overboard. But there's an old expression in this town: what's the note inside the note? Because sometimes a lot of times, I would say more than 50% of the time in notes, they're not able to articulate what the real problem is. So they say something, and you're like, what the fuck does that mean? Get on a Zoom or get on a phone call with these people, and then you find out, like, oh, actually they have a problem with something before it this is not landing, and yada, yada, yada. So by the time we got to episode 3, and we've been through all those kind of notes, which they drive me up the wall, but I do admit I need them, right? Kirk ran into a situation because he was spearheading 3 solo. And Ken Christensen was in LA, still working on it too. And he's now getting hit with notes from our crew. Because we're all collaborating now, and he's in this room and he's getting beat up over some, like, one idea, and he's sleep deprived and he fucking just loses it a couple times. Like, what
the fuck? I mean, Albert said it best. It's the note under the note, and I don't know. I definitely am the person that if I'm the only one in the room that's like, no, this has got to be the way, and there's 9 people going, what? Then I go, shit, man, maybe this is my problem, right? I need to solve this. They're on to something here. And I remember there's times that you want to give into that, right? Like in episode 3, the prologue of the boys inside the trunk, right? That was something I was extremely passionate about. I was like, oh my God, wait a minute. The coin press is hidden in the trunk. What if we start off, the boys are in the trunk, therefore it has an emotional connection to it. Winston would obviously gravitate towards that car and open that trunk, and it would be something that his brother, when it was like this, oh, this is so great. And then when it was written, the notes were like, hey, wait a minute, though. These boys are going to sleep in their trunk? How are they going to breathe? The mom's going to close them in the trunk? Like, and I started to kind of, you start to get nervous of like, are you defending something because you're just exhausted and you want it to work, or are they actually onto something? And Albert,
Kirk,
bless him,
there was that's a good moment to bring up because he came up with these, like I always say, Kirk has pop ideas. Two kids in an interrogation room. We saw 10 different versions of that opening scene in episode 1. And once he said 2 kids in an interrogation room, I'm like, well, that's pop. Then he pitched like 5 other. Kirk, stop! You got gold already. It's fucking gold. Okay. Then when we get to the trunk, Kirk and I are battling these notes about the kids in the air and how big they are. Can they fit into it? I'm like, hey, anything that has to do with like tangible production issues, that's us. You guys don't worry about that. We'll get those fucking kids in the trunk. Right? Then, some of the notes were like,
we'll get them in there.
Yeah, exactly. Young Winston doesn't sound like a street kid. So these are notes towards poor kids growing up in New York. And me and Kirk both come from poor kid backgrounds. And we're getting notes from rich people who never had poor kid backgrounds. And I'm like, I have a recording of myself at 7 years old. I don't sound like a poor kid. I sound like a kid. Okay, at 7. And as far as sleeping in the trunk, come on, man. I've seen far worse in the ghetto. You're lucky to be having something covering you, basically, right? Handing a gun, a bit of a stretch, but it's Frankie. Come on, handing a loaded gun to a kid.
Frankie.
No, but I mean,
it's Frankie. Yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
And then we always use this thing whenever we get into a bind. Me and Kirk were like, but it's Wick.
That's the good point. You can do nearly anything. Yeah.
You can do anything. Yeah, and that's why I'm so spoiled now. I can't do that. You got rules in every other movie. Like you have to abide by. Like you got a guy in a kilt. By the way, that was Kirk that played.
Yeah, the henchman.
Yeah. You got a guy in a kilt with cauliflower ears beating the shit out of somebody to a corny ass Baccarat song. Like, you can't do that in every movie.
No.
Well, with the great cauliflower ears, I might add.
Well, and the thing that's really great for us as fans is that, the Continental was so awesome. I hope you guys haven't made any plans for the next 5, 6, 7 years, because you guys could run with this universe that you've now kind of created with the Continental. There's so many different stories. Like, how did the women who run the phones, how did they get those jobs? How did the woman behind the bar, how did she get her job? There's so much there, because like how you talked about Breaking Bad, we got Better Call Saul, we got El Camino. They could go off on so many different stories with this Wick universe. It's just massive. I mean,
how the hotel even ran in the 80s, the 90s. Yeah,
but the truth is, we don't know. We don't know what they're going to do with it. They haven't called us or told us anything. We're just as in the.
Well, we're calling them now to tell them.
We're just
guys here at Bad Medicine say.
Yeah.
You should go. We're on the outside like you guys are.
Yeah.
But, I used to say, like, if the dollars make sense, I'm sure they'll do it. We had a great time. More importantly, like me and Kirk always talk. We always we wax nostalgic about shooting it and our bond with the crew and the cast, and everybody had a blast. I think you guys can tell, like, we had fun and we loved it. Like it was what do you call it?
Like a labor of love.
Labor of love. There you go. Must be the Xanax from last week. Labor of love, and when you say labor of love, you guys would probably, everybody in the audience would think like an independent movie with no money and all that stuff. It's like, this was a rare thing that happened while we were making this, and I had to remind everybody we work with, this won't happen again. This much freedom, this much fun, and hopefully the audience has fun with it too, because that was my main thing. And when we went into 3, I said to Kirk, I said, all I have to say about episode 3, and he hadn't even wrote it yet. I said, I just want people to go, that was wild. That's all I want.
Yeah, and it was.
Well, I think you got that from us 3.
Yeah, you got it. You nailed it.
This is one of my favorite. I do have to jump in a few. Sorry to be the party member, but one of my favorite stories. Hold on, I'm getting it. 1 second.
Must be Peacock ordering a second season.
Yeah, right.
Right on cue. Peacock calling.
That would be funny.
It was the 3rd movie. There was like a couple weeks left in production, and I was standing on set, and I had this wonderful assistant named Attila, and he walked up to me and said, "Hey, you look like you're swaying a little bit." Like when I was standing there, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm fine. I'm fine." And then I was like, "Oh, man, I don't know." And he was a boxer. So he's like, let's go get your blood pressure check. So I go get my blood pressure check. And this amazing Hungarian medic that spoke no English, she's checking my blood and she's just going, like the worst thing you want to see from a doctor. She's like, oh my God. Suddenly she's in her bag and she hangs up an IV and there's an IV in my arm. And I'm laying in my, I have an IV in my arm in my RV. How like decadent is that? And I'm in my RV and I'm like, oh wow. And I'm kind of coming to a little bit like, oh shit, I was dehydrated and I am exhausted. And my heart started pounding and I was like sweating and door busts open and it's Albert. And Albert goes, oh, there you are. And I've got an IV in my arm and I'm looking at him and he looks at me and goes, what's up? And I go, I didn't want you to see this. It's no big deal. He goes, oh, okay. Hey, when you're done with that, come find me. And he closed the door. And I looked through the window and Albert's limping because his back had gone out and one of his legs, like the muscle had completely
atrophied.
Completely had a baby leg.
I had a baby leg.
Wow. Like limping across. And I remember pulling my IV out of my arm and too early, there was a little fluid left and I wrapped it around and I go and find out and how exhausted we were that we never talked about that moment, right? Like in the moment, it wasn't like, dude, you had an IV in your arm. Man, you can barely walk. We just like to the like, we got to get this thing to the finish line. We were fried. I mean, completely fried. When I came back to the United States, being away from my family for a year, I could not function. Like my daughter tells a story of like she found me in the guest room, like looking at my screen, like watching a movie, and I was shell shocked. Like it's embarrassing to say, but it's like I had to make my kids lunches one day, and I was like, "What is this thing that I have to do? Who am I?" Like we were so deeply invested in our egos were in a great way of like, we're gonna fucking pay this thing off. We're gonna take this thing over the finish.
And we were running on fumes of love. And the great thing about production is it's like war. And I hate to do that analogy because people don't like you comparing anything to war or a battle. It exposes everything. The weak links, the strong links, the people that are there for the wrong reasons, the people that are there for the right reasons. It shows character, like true grit. You see people like do amazing things because it's such a high pressure job, and everybody out there talks about like Hollywood and like the glamour of it all. And on the set is very blue collar, just heavy equipment moved around by people, men and women, and sweaty, extreme cold or extreme heat, and it's so not sexy. And so fucked up and so dysfunctional, and that anybody gets a TV show or a movie that has some semblance of making sense is incredible. And that's the other thing, like to you guys, because what you guys are doing is also a form of critique. It's taking on a form of new movie critics in a way, right? And I think the traditional critics, not the old school ones, but the traditional new school written hand critics, they don't understand enough about what people go through, and they're not sensitive to watching these things. Like some people busted their ass on this, and whether it's an actor, a writer, or a director, and you're just like writing these snarky little comments in here, like nobody was away from their family, nobody paid the price, nobody didn't get paid their full rate. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in that show. 200, 300, 400 people. And the traditional written word that's why it's great to see these reaction videos too, because you can see when somebody's excited. Let's say you guys hate the one show, whatever show, it's our show or another show you guys are watching, you might hate it, but there's 4 times in it you're like, and that sometimes is enough, like, oh my God, they actually like that one thing. That's cool, So anyway, that's my long monologue. Sorry, Kirk, you gotta go. I know.
It's working with the stunt guys, like to give flowers to the stunt guys, like my first night on second unit with like a real professional high-end stunt team, like there's no heaters, there's no tents. These dudes stand out in the ice cold all night long. They don't complain, they don't whimper, they work, they get punched in the face, they're rolling cars. And I remember I was dying. I was like, and I was just pretending. And this one guy, Hank, kept coming to me and going, I haven't figured you out yet. you don't act like you're cold. You're hanging in there. And I was just like, I was faking it till I make it. I mean, I was just like, my God, man, like these dudes, men and women, work their ass off for not a lot of money.
Yeah.
They're rolling a car for $2,500.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it shows when something like that comes through to the screen, when everybody buys in, you get the Continental, and it works, man.
I would be remiss to not ask this question before you got to go, Kirk. I know you got to go. The main question, I don't know how you guys are going to answer this, but I'll just throw it out and let you guys do it.
I know what it is.
The main question we got from our viewers to ask both of you was, we have Frankie, we have Yen. Yen's pregnant. Yeah. We have Winston in John Wick 4 showing a lot of compassion, even throughout 1, 2, and 3 to Jonathan. And so the question is that a baby John Wick? Is Frankie
there's going to be a slight disagreement between me and Kirk. Kirk is the creator, so I'll let him go first.
God, I don't even know if I should even touch this.
Feel free to pass.
Let me say this. Let me say this. I probably fucked it up for Kirk because the timeline. Okay, the original script came to me in 1975. Okay, and you can buy that the Keanu in the movies is younger than the actual Keanu. John Wick is actually younger than Keanu, right? The moment I knew I wanted disco, I had to open up the years, but it was a very malleable kind of impressionistic take on 70s New York. It's not 1 year, but it's obviously, if you're going to be literal about it, it's 1979 because of the songs from the disco era, right? So that's kind of where I fucked Kirk if he was headed down that road. Because one of you were born in 1979, Oak.
Yeah.
Or no,
both of us.
Both of us.
Which one?
Both of us were
okay.
born in
Okay.
79.
Oh, that's right. You're both 44. Okay.
Let me say.
Yeah, okay.
How do I put this? The big question from a lot of fans is what you're saying, the obvious. It's like Frankie and Yen, right? Frankie moves a lot like John Wick.
Hair, the beautiful hair,
the beautiful mane of hair.
One of the critiques was, "Oh, no John Wick, no John Wick." I could speculate. Maybe John Wick is in there somewhere. I don't know.
We'll take it.
Yes.
We'll take it.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And you don't need to worry too much about the age difference. It's not the years, it's the mileage when you're a hitman. So
yeah.
And
it's John Wick.
Yeah, it's
John Wick. Yeah, the perfect end. Hey, it's John Wick.
Yep. The perfect escape.
I gotta tell you guys though, thank you for this. Like,
thank you.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to watch you guys watching that, and we're more entertained. Like, we've seen the fucking thing already. No, for you guys.
No, sincere thank you guys because
this is awesome.
At least from my perspective, you guys presented us an opportunity to just be 0.01% involved in at least our favorite. Series of all time of the John Wick or universe, we'll just say, for lack of better terms. So just by having this conversation with you, I feel like there's that 0.01% that we're slightly toe dipping.
We dip the toe in.
I think,
and we have to come back if we do something else. John Wick or non-John Wick related.
I would absolutely love.
What are you holding up?
Yeah.
If we were all in the same room now, I would slide this across the table.
I said I want one of those so that anytime my wife and I go to a hotel, I'd be like, I'd like to speak to the manager, please. And by the third time, she'd be like, get the fuck out of here.
We both have the adjudicator coin. I have Cormac's hand in my living room. I have the father's gun. And before we go, I want to wrap up something that's on Reddit, or clear up something that's on Reddit, because there are the gun fanatics that get up into this thing that think that the father's gun is a Desert Eagle, and it's not a Desert Eagle. It was based on a Desert Eagle, and it was hand built. The father's gun, and it has a longer back, whatever you call the thing on the back. It hangs over a bit, and if you look at the nose of it, the nose of it is flipped upside down. It's like the Desert Eagle is a triangle shape. I think like this way.
That's
and
kind
we
of
flip that triangle.
Yeah, I have a Desert Eagle at home, so I
Yeah, it's kind of like this, right?
Yeah, so
it's
it,
like
goes
this.
up and then kind of like that. I didn't
Yeah.
see that. I didn't see
two
Desert Eagle
holes,
when I saw it.
But the father's gun has two, what do you call it?
Barrels?
Chambers? Like two barrels.
Yeah.
Yeah, like two bullets are coming out of that gun.
Yeah,
like
it's a double-chambered.
Mysterious kind of, what do you call it? A fantasy gun in a way, right?
And it was
The gun
filled
roll-
with cello pegs.
Exactly. But people doing deep dives on gun shit, it's like, get over it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not meant to be a real gun. It's meant to be a not even modified. Like the father made himself a gun. And what fucking criminal puts his name on a gun?
His idea.
Oh my God.
Oh, fantastic.
That was an 11th hour. Like, oh, man, how are they gonna know? Oh, I know. There we go.
Name on it. There we go.
Oh my God.
Thank you guys. Seriously,
This has been an absolute
Really
treat,
appreciate it.
guys.
So thank you guys very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so
You
much.
too.
Can't
We'll see you guys soon.
Yes.
So
Holding you
thank
to
you
it.
very much.
be seeing you.
Seeing you.
Yeah.
That's the way to finish it.